Can you guys see me? Are we here? Ugh. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm real gnarly right now. Hi. Okay, I see you guys coming in. Remember to say hi because I can't see you're here otherwise. Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Oh, first time. 2 first times in the chat. Yay. 3. I could see your comments. Yes, yes, yes. Hi. Welcome, everybody. Yay. First time. Oh my gosh. Yay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for liking my house. I washed my curtains because they got covered in cat hair and my allergies were getting really bad, and then they broke a little, so I'm really, really sad. But that's okay. Cat is more important than curtains. Everybody. Wow, so many first-time people. Yay. Thank you for coming. Thank you, thank you. Yay. I actually really like Twitch. I'm, like, really into Twitch. I've never seen Avatar 3. No, I haven't even seen Avatar 2. I saw the first one in theaters when it came out. Yes, welcome to all the first timers, as Virgo said. Yes, yes, yes. Came from the TikTok live. Cool. Chairman Fork. Yes. She's asleep in bed. Oh, I'm your body double. Cool. Good morning, Godless Communist. Hi, everybody. Romonsta. I got these at the bins. The Goodwill trash bins. You know the ones? Ugh, I'm so sleepy today, guys. I'm not gonna lie. I'm real messed up. And look at my eyes from the cat allergies. They're fucked up. I'm like, ah. But yeah, I did dye my hair at least, so there's that. She's got some bounce. Hi, first time chat. Jelly Boots. Hello, hello. Watch the cat. Should Fork lead the discussion today? You would not want a discussion led by Fork. I think Fork has bad politics. How many people are in right now? Can we see? How many people are in? It's the spit. She cleans herself all the time, too. It says 80? 80. Okay. 80 is not bad. I think Fork's an anarchist, yeah. You can see. I think 80 is not bad. Should we get started with 80 or should we wait a few? Hydrate. I need to get water. Okay, I'm bringing my computer with me to the kitchen to get water. We're doing it. I got a light too, a clip-on light for my computer to give it better light no matter where we are, but I haven't used it yet. So I'm trying, guys. Your cat's a landlord? That makes sense. Mine too. They don't do anything. So... You know what? According to the internet, I'm a landlord. And with the CIA. The funniest part is the people who are like, you have to be a federal agent. I'm like, yes, the federal government is paying people to tell you to hate the federal government. Stunning analysis. These people, they have rocks for brains. It's absolutely wild. And meanwhile, they're like, no, not my precious government-funded propaganda. That's correct. You must be wrong. You're the government. And I'm like, the thing you're telling me we literally know is paid by the government. Like, what? These people are doofuses. Okay. Should you be scared? I have no idea. That in Russia. Yeah, don't come for my NGOs. They love their little fucking NGOs. They love them. All right. How many people do we have in here? We have more or less. I'm going to wipe my screen on. People in the room count. Yeah, just don't go to a tall hotel in San Francisco. Yeah. If you start to feel a little weird, they spiked you with LSD. 92. Okay. 92. Let's do it. Yeah, this is my office. If you look the opposite direction, though, it's like super messy. This lamp, actually, my best friend got this lamp for her house like 12 years ago, and she decided it didn't match the vibe, so she gave it to me. It's vintage, though. I know it's raining so much. Are you in LA, too? Yeah, Billy Corgan's politics. That ended up wild, right? Oh, I need to redeem my hydrate. Yeah. 101. Okay, 101. Let's go. Let's get started. Love Smashing Pumpkins. Billy Corgan's politics are a shit show. They're so bad. Yeah. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Today we're going to talk about Sudan. We had found an article on Reuters about Sudan, but let's go to Politico. Sudan, the latest news, because I hit a paywall on Reuters. No big deal. So we're going to look for what the most... A Hyatt hotel ad. Oh, this place is so dystopian. We're not going to find it here. That's November. That's 7 days ago. Travel ban. Let's look it up. Latest Sudan news. We found something that was interesting before. Currently on a 5-stream streak. Okay. Yeah, you're seeing the research in real time. We're looking. We can look at Sudan's latest news. Oh, okay, here. What is the new Sudan peace initiative that Sudan's prime minister presented to the UN? So we're going to look at this. I also wanted to look at, we're going to do a little primer on what's going on in Sudan. And there's a Black Agenda report interview with somebody from the Sudanese Communist Party. So we can see what the Sudanese comrades think. So this is kind of going to be what we talk about today for foreign policy. So, the first thing we're going to do is give a brief overview on what's going on in Sudan. So basically in 1989, al-Bashir became in charge in Sudan, and he led for like 30 years basically. And the thing about al-Bashir is that he opposed some elements of U.S. imperialism. Like, he was a very vocal critic of the U.S. going to war in like Iraq and like the war on terror and all of that. But he was not about like the people. Like, the people there did not fuck with al-Bashir. And the communists did not fuck with al-Bashir. And basically he earned the ire, though, of the United States and our allies for critiquing us on the global stage. Now, Israel actually funded a separatist movement in South Sudan years ago. So a large section of South Sudan totally left. Like, they became their own country because of Israel's backing. So they started operating kind of as like a Western satellite. And then there ended up being a coup in 2019, I believe, that overthrew al-Bashir. But then the government that took al-Bashir's place was very, very right wing. And the military, who we'll see talked about a lot here, they actually started kind of running the show, fighting for power. So what's weird is you have different factions fighting for power in Sudan right now. That's why people call it a civil war. But none of those factions represent the people. None of this is like a revolutionary army. You have some people who are backed by the United States and randomly at the same time, like Egypt and other small areas. You have the army that people are talking about that's been committing all of the war crimes and atrocities and horrors that you might have seen in the news. They've been starving people. They've blocked off an entire city of 1.2 million people who've been forced to live by eating animal feed, and they just ran out of animal feed. They're committing mass sexual assaults. They're committing all sorts of horrific crimes. They are backed by the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. So none of this, though, represents the interests of the people, right? None of these people are what's represented well. So this interview that Black Agenda Report did on December 17th, so that's just last week, with the Sudanese Communist Party, I think is a good buffer before we talk about the current events. Because you're going to want to know, what do the people with left-wing politics in Sudan have to say about all of this? Of course, Israel's involved, right? Yeah. So I'll zoom in so you guys can see this on my screen a little better. And I'm going to get reading. Right now, I'm not going to be able to see the chat. So chat amongst yourselves, make fun of me, do whatever you want. I'm not going to be able to see it for a few minutes. So this is originally from People's World. And it says, a brutal civil war is raging on the African continent in the nation of Sudan. The injection of illegal weapons and the jockeying of foreign powers for control over the country's gold and other resources only adds to the misery of colonialism's legacy and internal armed conflict. And suffering the worst of it all are the country's children, women, and poor people generally. International help is desperately needed to halt hostile outside intervention and stop the killing. That's the message that Salwa Saeed wants the world to hear. She's a longtime member of the Sudanese Communist Party, and People's World had the privilege to speak with her on the sidelines of the Convention of the Communist Party of Canada held in Montreal from December 5th to 7th. Using the word crisis to describe the current situation in Sudan would be an understatement, and the atrocities accumulate faster than anyone can keep up. Even as People's World was interviewing Said, she received a message on her phone from her comrades about an attack on a school back home that killed dozens of kindergartners and their teachers. She said her country is being torn apart by warring factions, none of whom are on the side of Sudan's poor and working class population. Fascist forces, through their two wings, the Islamist movement and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF is the army. So when we talk about the RSF, that's that army that I was describing that's backed by the UAE. And weirdly, the Islamist movement is backed by places like Egypt, but also the United States, kind of, sometimes. They have been waging a ruthless and large-scale war since April 15th, 2023, Said said. The civil war, which features fighting among and between paramilitary forces and the official state army, the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF. I believe that's the correct one. Did you guys catch me in the chat with that mistake? The RSF and the SAF is kind of who's fighting here. The RSF is the ones that are backed by the UAE, though. And the state army is the SAF, sorry. It's complicated by the actions of regional actors, most notably the United Arab Emirates, which has supplied arms to the RSF in exchange for access to gold from Sudan's mines. Said said, and the SCP, that's the Sudanese Communist Party, argue that the atrocities and aggression of the Islamist groups and RSF that have been witnessed over the last few years are primarily aimed at obstructing the December 29th revolution in Sudan, which demanded freedom, peace, justice, and democratic transformation. So remember, when they overthrew al-Bashir, the people wanted a government that represented them, but quickly this was stamped out by a right-wing transitional government instead. Yeah, I misspoke. I'm so sorry. Okay, so here we have a photo of refugees who fled. And they're now in South Sudan. Remember, because South Sudan became its own country, backed by Israel. That revolution got a start with mass protests in December 2018 that eventually resulted in the overthrow of dictator Omar al-Bashir and the assumption of state power by the military. The Communist Party, in conjunction with the Sudanese Professionals Association and neighborhood resistance committees, participated in the protests. So again, this is kind of like in Ukraine, where they were like, oh, protests are going on, people are getting involved, and pretty quickly right-wing forces were like, this is not your movement, we're co-opting this, we're taking this over. The party had long opposed al-Bashir's dictatorship and stayed in the streets with the people after he was gone, determined to not let the military cement itself in place. It saw the uprising as essentially a class revolt against military Islamist rule that was eventually sabotaged by compromises made with the generals, resulting in the hijacking of the revolution. So remember, the army that we are talking about here is the official state army, the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF. And they are now kind of being backed by the United States a little bit, but also by Egypt, sometimes even by people who are like not allies of the United States, but sometimes not even fully by the United States. The United States is kind of playing both sides here, to be honest, because we just want control of the resources and we don't care who wins as long as they're on our side. And that's what you're seeing with a lot of the people getting involved here. And that's why at the beginning of this article, it talked about how it's kind of like a clash over just wanting to control gold and other resources there. But the UAE, they're supporting not the army, but the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Now, getting back into this. Demands for a quick transition to civilian rule by the Communist Party there, Labor, and other forces of civil society were quickly derailed following the launch of the revolution. The first blow was the Khartoum massacre of 2019, which saw SAF and RSF forces, then united in the Transitional Military Council, kill hundreds and rape dozens in an attempt to disperse the crowds who were still agitating the streets, demanding that the people themselves, and not soldiers, determine the country's future. The RSF is a holdover of past fighting, born out of al-Bashir's genocidal suppression in Darfur in the early 2000s. Many of its troops are thus veterans of past war crimes and mass killing campaigns, so their participation in the Khartoum massacre and other atrocities came as no surprise. Hopes to salvage the revolution and for the people to re-seize the initiative from the transitional military kind of alliance were dashed when a split occurred between the SAF and the RSF in 2023. Since then, the people of Sudan have been caught in the crossfire, leading to the mass displacement of at least 12 million and deaths of uncounted numbers of people. And that figure of 12 million, it's worth noting, that's considered like one of the largest internal displacement crises in like contemporary history. Like that is a huge number. Saeed said, it is the details of that human side of the fighting which should spur the world to action. As a mother of 4 daughters herself, the situation of women in Sudan particularly pains her heart. You may have heard about documented genocidal atrocities, such as those that recently took place in the city of El Fasher and its surroundings. Those atrocities have shocked the global conscience with killings and mass rapes of women and sexual slavery. But Saeed said these have become daily practices for both sides in the war. Another common tactic is the enforced disappearance of thousands of citizens, including women and children. Even if civilians manage to escape or survive, there is also a mental health disaster in the offing that will play out for years and across generations. As Saeed warned, there is a total absence of psychological support for the victims. People don't have time to process the effect the war is having on their psyche, though, because many of them are devoting their days to scrounging for food and keeping themselves alive. There is a crisis in obtaining enough food. Famine stalks the country, Saeed said. She provided People's Worlds with documents detailing some of the latest statistics compiled by the United Nations. Over 21 million face food insecurity. And by the way, 21 million, the population of California where I live is 30 million. So that's the entire population of California almost experiencing food insecurity. Another 14 million are determined to be in food crisis. And 6.3 million have entered what the UN calls a state of emergency food insecurity. In other words, they are starving to death. Whether it's hunger, disease, sexual assault, or gunshot wounds, the people of Sudan have nowhere to go for medical help when they need it. Saeed's document showed that 70% of the country's health facilities are either destroyed or out of service. Cholera, malaria, and dengue fever have resulted in hundreds of deaths due to lack of health care, unavailability of life-saving medications, and the nearly complete absence of medical staff. These immediate disasters, already horrifying enough, are not the only problem Saeed is worried about. There are also the calamities of the future that are currently in the works. One of the most notable features in this war, which has become known worldwide, she says, is the catastrophe it has caused for children. She explains that there has been a complete collapse of education institutions, depriving millions of children of their right to education, threatening the future of an entire generation. She said current estimates are that as many as 14 million children who should be enrolled in school are not in the classroom. Affected schools and displaced people face significant difficulties in providing education, with the situation only expected to worsen if the conflict continues, Saeed told the world. Many schools have been destroyed, while others have been repurposed as shelters for the people displaced from their homes by the war. Sudan's communists remain optimistic and have confidence in their people, despite the disaster that's engulfed them. They're asking for international help, but not the military variety of assistance that Western imperial powers or their regional accomplices are often eager to provide. Peace is primarily in the hands of the Sudanese people and their own living forces, Saeed said. It's no longer hidden that the Quad initiative is not a serious attempt to end the crisis. The Quad refers to the consortium of the United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, which claims to be working to achieve peace in Sudan. Again, see how they're all involved in various different ways. Saeed asserted that the Quad's group's main goal is to contain the consequences of the fighting in Sudan and restore the balance of influence in the region. The recent shift in rhetoric by these powers, whereby they express such concern for the humanitarian situation in Sudan, does not reflect an ethical review of their past positions and actions, she says. Instead, the SCP believes the change is a tactical necessity imposed by the resilience of the people, the exhaustion of the parties to war, and the exacerbation of regional risks to peace. Saeed said it's important to remember that all the major supporters of the warring parties in Sudan are allies of the United States. The SCP remembers well, she told People's World, that all of Washington's dealings with Sudan have proven that the issues and aspirations of its people are merely pretexts employed to serve plans for sustaining dependency and facilitating resource exploitation, gold mostly. That's why the most recent roadmap to peace did not deviate from the most minimal of objectives: a fragile ceasefire, superficial settlements, and a nominal civilian government established outside the will of the Sudanese people. So here is Saeed herself with Liz Rowley from the Communist Party of Canada. What's needed is an immediate end to foreign interference, including shipments of arms and illicit finances to the warring factions, the termination of illegal outbound shipments of Sudan's natural wealth, especially gold, and an urgent rush of food and health aid for its beleaguered people. Saeed urged Sudan's friends and supporters to put these demands to their government. We need a campaign of solidarity by all of the progressive and peace forces in the world to repel the imperialist assault and its regional agents against our country. Sudan's communists hope their comrades in the world communist movement will answer that call and do whatever they can to build an international movement to help win peace in Sudan and open the path for our people to decide our own future, free of interference and war. Okay, so that was a big read. Do we have any thoughts from the chat before we go on to the current peace deal proposal? Anything stand out to anybody? Anybody have any questions? What I think is really interesting is just like no matter who wins, the Western world wins. Yes, USA doing USA shit. USA is going to win no matter who wins, right? The people of Sudan are going to lose no matter who wins. And I think that's really, unfortunately, how all warfare plays out in the world today. The United States, we don't send our troops in very often anymore. We pay guys on the ground. We pay guys on the ground to do our bidding. The origin of the USA and Israel going into Sudan again. Yeah, so Israel basically got involved in Sudan during al-Bashir. I'm going to look up when South Sudan was created so I give you accurate information. South Sudan created when? So, okay, 2011. So basically, al-Bashir was in charge in Sudan, I believe, from 1989 to 2019. I think those are the correct dates. I'm 90% sure those are the correct dates. And basically, he wasn't very popular. But he wasn't very popular in, like, a unique way. Like, he did not fuck with the United States. But he also did not fuck with his people. So his people did not like him. But nobody kind of liked him in the world stage. And Israel didn't like him, certainly, because Israel is allied with the United States. And so he was a really vocal opponent of the war on terror. So basically, Israel gave weapons and arms and financing to South Sudan for them to stage a separatist movement to leave Sudan and become their own country that was basically an ally of the United States and Israel. So that's what South Sudan, that's how it ended up getting started. Now, basically, the United States started getting involved in Sudan, one, because they have gold, right? That's kind of been like a forever point of interest. But also because al-Bashir was a problem for them. They're like, we've got to get this guy out of here, basically, because he's not sympathetic to U.S. Interests in the region. So that is kind of the origin story of us getting involved and why. So the main goals are, one, take resources, especially gold, just like Burkina Faso. And number two, get someone out of power in the region who critiques our foreign policy. And you'll see that's the biggest way to set people off or to set the United States off is if you critique what we are doing around the globe. We will lose our shit and get mad at that. That happened with Chavez. Chavez really became a main target of our ire after he critiqued what we did in the war on terror as well. But, the difference with Chavez was taking care of his people. Al-Bashir is not taking care of his people. Yeah, wanting resources, yeah, exactly. Just like Venezuela. Exactly. How can we help? You don't have money. Is there anybody on TikTok doing something similar for Palestinians? This is horrible. Yeah, it is horrible. I think the thing that's hard about this is that unlike Israel and Palestine, people's brains are simple, right? They're like, Israel is fighting Palestine. Palestine's doing their best to survive it. Palestine are victims, and Israel is very clearly an evil aggressor, right? Sudan's different because the Sudanese people are here, and then these two factions, backed by various imperial money sources, are fighting each other while everybody else suffers, right? So it's like you have to think about it like a three-party thing going on in Sudan, and that's harder for people to understand. Like, they don't really understand. Like, hey, bad guy A and bad guy B are fighting with mom and dad's money, and everyday average people are getting sexually assaulted in mass and starving to death as a result of it. Yeah, it's exactly. So it's very, very hard to get people to care about that. So you have to really simplify how you talk about it, right? And I think the simplest way we can talk about it is like that. Like, hey, two bad dudes are fighting for power. Bad groups are fighting for power in Sudan, and they are slaughtering innocent people in the process. And all these people want is to be able to be in charge of their own country. And neither of these groups represent that. So I think that's kind of the simplest way you can explain it to people and talk about it to people to try to raise awareness. July 9th, 2011 is 2 days after you graduated high school. Wow. Okay. That's interesting. So that's what was going on there. I want to look up exactly if the USA has given money to both of these sides. I get all the analogies. RSF and what is the other one? What are the analogies? I'm really bad at keeping letters straight. Also, fun fact, whenever my partner tries to talk to me about their job, their whole job is like strings of letters crammed together for things. And I'm like, I am not following anything. SAF and RSF. SAF. So, AI overview. We've been giving them aid. I do know that. Trump cut aid to Sudan, though. We have given money to the SAF, I know. So I'm not really sure. Obviously, the UAE is fueling RSF. That's what we know. The U.S. has sanctioned multiple enterprises and individuals on both sides. Okay. See, we're kind of playing both sides here. But I want to know how much money we've materially given to both of these people, besides the humanitarian assistance. Amnesty. Amnesty's super biased, but let's see what they say. Amnesty's a little kooky. I don't know if you guys know that or not. They are able to flee to South Sudan, some of them, but in one city in particular, they are all trapped in it. 1.2 million people are like trapped in a city, basically, right now, starving to death as we speak. God, I really hate Amnesty. I can't even read this. I can't even read this garbage. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm like trying to find. I'm gonna have to look this up separately to find exactly how much money the United States has given to these groups. Basically, I know we've provided humanitarian aid, but that's bullshit. You know, we don't really care about that. Khartoum. Yeah, I believe that's the city. Khartoum State. Yeah. No, that's not that figure either. There's one city in particular right now, but that's like super, super current. Let me see if I can find it. And that's where they're stuck eating animal feed. Yeah, in the city. What is this city? Oh, it's El Fasher. That's what it was. El Fasher. Amnesty is super, super biased. They're wackadoo. They have a neoliberal agenda. You'll see them literally cite American propaganda networks sometimes. Like, they have a very... them and Human Rights Watch basically have the same agenda, which is to serve as the humanitarian face of neoliberalism. So they will never present any sort of political analysis that challenges the hegemony of capitalism and Western power, but they will be like, oh my God, this is so sad, about things like Palestine and stuff, without ever calling into question, you know, the power structures that got us there. So one of the things about like North Korea in particular is they will literally cite Radio Free Asia, which is a CIA propaganda network that the USA created to talk about North Korea. Like, they're not doing due diligence. It's a very like farmers market, NPR, like Democrat stronghold kind of assessment of the world. So they're a broken clock that's right twice a day, of course, but in general, you can't trust their assessments of things because they will fall back on neoliberal slop 100% of the time. Farmers market. Yeah, exactly. It's like that. You know what I mean when I say that? The gentle rain. Yeah, I don't have real walls. You guys know that. Oh, new follower. Okay. Yay. Thank you. Whole Foods Network. Is there advice for feeling helpless? It's so hard to not feel depressed and nihilistic. Yeah, I mean, okay, this is like not gonna be great, but you need to remember the world has always been hard. Life is hard, right? And the only thing that's going to help us is looking forward. So the fact that things are very, very difficult and very, very depressing in the world today, and things are very fucked up, that shouldn't be something that discourages you. That should be something that encourages you to fight for a better future, because we know a better future is possible. We've seen other people do it. We know we can pull it off. So you just have to try. And right now, it helps also to think about it as a plan. Like right now, we're not expecting to save the world. Right now, we're expecting to make people realize the evils of neoliberalism and capitalism. And be like, hey, this shit's bad. This shit is not fucking working for anybody. We need something different. It's a very easy first step, right? That's where we are right now. And as long as you remember that's your goal, like you can stay on track and it helps you feel like you're actually accomplishing something, you know? Yeah. Yeah, Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman type neoliberalism. Exactly. Great. Hopeful spite. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even pumping anti-capitalist posts throughout Reddit for the, yeah, see, exactly. That's what you know, just like, we're propagandizing, guys. They're propagandizing. We got to propagandize harder. We got to agitate. We got to be like, no. Homemade propaganda. Exactly. Just keep going. I mean, keep going, but keep going with your goal. What's your goal? Your goal is to make people realize who the big bad truly is, and it is neoliberal capitalism. That's who the big bad is. That's who we're dealing with here. So, with that in mind, we're going to take a look over here at this news story that came out about the new peace initiative proposed by Sudan's Prime Minister, Camille Idris. It says the RSF has rejected the plan proposed by Sudanese Prime Minister, which calls on the paramilitary group to withdraw. The RSF is the one backed by the UAE, remember. So Sudanese Prime Minister Camille Idris on Monday presented a proposal before the United Nations Security Council seeking an end to the country's nearly 3-year war that has created the world's worst humanitarian crisis, with some 14 million people displaced. Remember the last one we looked at was 12 million. This one says 14 million. The North African nation descended into civil war in April of 2023 after a power struggle broke out between the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the head of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, Mohammed Hamdan Hamedi Dagalo. Now remember, 2019 is when al-Bashir was toppled, so for almost 4 years, these two groups led together in an alliance, a military alliance that was super right-wing. The recent massacres in Sudan's Darfur region have drawn global attention to the conflict, with rights groups calling on rival sides to engage in dialogue to end the bloodshed. Idris, the prime minister of the transitional government, proposed an immediate ceasefire in Sudan, monitored by the UN, the African Union, and the League of Arab States. He proposed a complete RSF troops withdrawal from the territory it controls. They didn't like that. The RSF and its allies control roughly 40% of Sudan at this time. Analyst Jihad Massamoun told Anadolu News in November. So that includes most of the Darfur and Kordofan regions. In October, the RSF seized control of El Fasher, the capital of the North Darfur state, killing more than 1,500 people. It also controls key infrastructure, such as the Heglig oil field near the South Sudan border, seized on December 8th. The remaining 60%, including the capital Khartoum, is controlled by the SAF. It maintains control over eastern Sudan, including Port Sudan along the Red Sea, its de facto administrative capital, northern states, and parts of central Sudan. It also retains air power. On Monday, the Sudanese army said it recaptured a town southwest of the city of Al-Rahad in the North Kordofan state. Idris, appointed by the army in May, proposed that the RSF members, after their withdrawal, would be placed in camps and vetted. He said the plan would reintegrate RSF fighters not accused of war crimes into society. He promised to hold free elections after a transitional period aimed at fostering inter-Sudanese dialogue. This is not about winning a war, he said, but about ending a cycle of violence that has plagued Sudan for decades. The UNSC has not voted on the proposal yet, and discussions are still underway. How did the RSF react to the peace plan? Al-Basha Tabik, advisor to Hamedi, announced that the RSF rejected Idris's plan. Yes, I'm non-binary, but I'm the person from TikTok. You could say that. In a statement posted on Facebook, Tabik was quoted as saying the plan was nothing more than a recycling of outdated exclusionary rhetoric that was indistinguishable from the position taken by military chief al-Burhan. Tabik said that the idea that RSF would have to withdraw from the territory it controls is closer to fantasy than to politics. Regional mediators, along with the United States, have been pushing for a different plan, which al-Burhan had earlier rejected, arguing that the UAE's participation made it biased in favor of the paramilitaries and against the army. Sudan's transitional government accuses the UAE of arming the RSF. I think we know that's true. The Quad group, comprising the U.S., Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE, had been working to mediate between the SAF and the RSF. But remember, USA and Egypt and UAE all definitely, I know, have our hands involved in this and are backing some of these people. Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't be surprised if they are too. The UAE has consistently denied allegations of arming and financing the RSF, and in March condemned Sudan's decision to bring a case against it at the International Court of Justice, describing the accusations as cynical publicity stunt. The Quad backs its own truce proposal, obviously. And U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Jeffrey Bartos, on Monday argued that the RSF and SAF to accept an alternative plan for a humanitarian truce. We urge both belligerents to accept this plan without preconditions immediately, Bartos said, addressing the UNSC before Idris spoke. This is just silly, though, because it's like they're not going to. Also, the RSF controls 40% of Sudan. Like, why? What incentive do they have to try to change anything? You know? I don't understand, like, what the leverage is. They have no leverage. In September, the Quad issued a statement urging an immediate 3-month truce as a step towards permanent ceasefire, improved humanitarian access, and the launch of a political process for civilian-led transition. The RSF announced in early November that it accepted the Quad's truce proposal, but the fighting has persisted. Idris told the UNSC on Monday that his peace proposal was homemade rather than imposed on us, an implicit reference to the truce plans backed by the Quad. But they don't like that either. So, Jorkin Peanutson. That's like an old school troll. I just want to say Jorkin Peanutson is very old school. Like the name, the 6-7 thing. This is like a nostalgic brand of trolling to me. A simpler day on the internet. Al-Rashid Muhammad Ibrahim, who leads the Center for International Political Relations Studies in Khartoum, noted the novelty of the message lies in its clear vision and its reframing of the conflict in Sudan as an act of aggression. Political analyst Faisal Abdel Karim said that for any initiative to succeed, it must be accepted by the opposing side, which in this case is the RSF. He added that the plan also needs to gain the support of the international regional powers that influence the Sudanese landscape. He said parts of the plan are reasonable, but some parts are not. Political analyst Al-Wati Kamir told Al Jazeera that Idris presented that peace plan during a briefing session requested by Sudan in the absence of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. It becomes questionable when the prime minister of a war-torn country travels thousands of kilometers to address a hall dominated by heads of missions or their deputies at a time that is politically dead because of Christmas or the end of year's holidays. Okay, whatever. That seems a little silly. It is wholesome trolling. It really is wholesome trolling. You're so right. Ahmed Aboulghiat, the Secretary General of the 22-member Arab League, praised the peace plan. But the thing is, like, it doesn't matter if all these people are praising it. The RSF's not going to do it. So, like, they're all just, we did something. You didn't do anything. The RSF's not going to do it. And this is the same issue with all the peace plans negotiated with Israel. Israel's not going to do it. You know, so I don't understand why these people think that this is progress in any capacity. Like, when you have a faction that is hell-bent on not having peace until the entire region is conquered and dominated, what incentive do they have to follow your peace plan? That's just silly, you know? And meanwhile, again, the SAF are not the good guys here. Like, they're a whole ass mess too. So fighting obviously has intensified. Escalation around Al-Fashir happened. Oh, I've seen people call the DPRK imperialist too. I'm like, what empire do you think they have? Like, people just be saying things. Like, it's absolutely wild. So, you know, the RSF is regaining more territorial control that they previously had even lost. Thousands continue to flee the violence. The SAF says that it's destroying RS convoys in North Darfur. I mean, I don't know. This is just pretty wild. So, yeah, 21 million people across the country are facing acute hunger. 14 million people have had to flee their homes, and that's it. And then I have an ad for Nicholas K., the clothing brand. Okay, so that's what we have going on there. What do we think, everybody? What do we think about this? To me, these are what we call, like, imperialist wars, right? Like, nobody wins. Nobody's winning in this situation. Why do we see so many Palestinians on social media advocating and not as much Sudanese people, or is it just my feed? I mean, it could be a number of things. I have seen people from Sudan, but they probably don't have access as easily to internet. I mean, the thing about Palestine is that it's right next to Israel, so they have access to, like, cell phones, like internet, things like that a little bit more easily, right? You know, I think that it sounds like people in Sudan have been going through this for a lot longer. I mean, people in Palestine have been going through this since 1948, since the first Nakba, obviously. But there were periods of relative stability The people in Sudan have not known as many periods of relative stability. Also, probably fewer of them speak English, would have to be my guess, right? They're saying that education is a major issue. To get through to Americans, you have to speak English. This is not really a proxy war as clear-cut as I would say Ukraine and Russia is, for example. The United States is kind of playing both sides here. We're waiting to see who wins. Our allies are backing these warring factions as well. And basically, whoever wins, we want them to be our guys so that we can have access to the gold there. So it's not really a proxy war so much as it is, that meme of like the lobsters fighting each other? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I'm going to see if I can find it. Hold on. We're going to look for it. Oh, grown brilliance, lab-grown diamonds. Lobster fight meme. Yes, this one. This one. It's this, okay? So this is the RSF. This is the SAF. This is the United States. This is the UAE. And this is Egypt. And this might be Saudi Arabia, but I haven't researched Saudi Arabia's involvement enough. And this is what we're doing. We're just like, whoever wins, we want to win. And meanwhile, the people of Sudan are suffering and dying. This meme is my political analysis. This is what's going on. But then imagine the floor is in between them is made out of gold. Okay, that's it. So that's what's going on. Yeah, it's pretty fucked. It's pretty bad. Yeah, that's true. People don't care about Africa as much. And I wonder how much is a language barrier. How many people, in Palestine, they were teaching themselves to speak English, specifically to talk to Americans. But it's very, very, very challenging. Yeah, it's very sad. So, a general thing I try to do that's like a shortcut is I always try to see what the communist parties in these places say. And you can usually see they're usually active. They post statements. So if you're ever like, what's going on in that place? A great place to start if you don't want to consume propaganda is like, I'm going to see what the Communist Party of that place has to say about it. It is a millennial meme, isn't it? It's so, like, look at the outfits. The outfits are even millennial. Like, the flares with the flip-flops. Is this a track jacket? Like, this is, like, the most, like, every guy I went to high school with wore this outfit. The cargo shorts and the beanies. It's a very millennial meme. It truly is. But I feel like this is, like, the perennial. It's, like, the evergreen. Yeah. I don't know. So the situation in Sudan, obviously, very, very horrifying. Yeah. So I think the thing we need to do, if you want to educate people and you want to talk about it, just remember, like, hey, no matter who wins in this situation, the people of Sudan lose. The people of Sudan are struggling. And the most important thing we could do right now is provide material support to the people of Sudan. Because if the people of Sudan are able to eat food, are able to survive, they are able to fight their own battles with enough time. But right now, no decent person should be siding with either the existing government of Sudan or the RSF. But I will say the RSF is engaging in, because they were the same people who had been involved in the famous Darfur conflict previously. They are very well trained in the art of terrorizing civilians. Most of the terror you see going on is coming from them right now. That doesn't mean the other side is good, though. So I think that's important to remember, too. Oh, posture check. Thank you. Yes, I'll do a little stretch to help my posture, too. So, yeah, that's that. I think we might... I know I'm all like this. I'm like a gargoyle, a fucking gargoyle. So, we have time for one more story. Should we do, I'm actually going to get my charger and my glasses because I can't wear my contacts right now because of the cat. So should we do a domestic story? Should we look at something happening domestically? The Hellcat story took me out. I even made a TikTok about it earlier today because it was so funny to me. If you were my glasses, where would you be? Oh, your grandfather was the WWP. You know what? I honestly don't have much experience with them. WWP, they're not Trotskyists, right? Anybody else have experience with them? They're old school. I remember like I read the WWP newspaper sometimes, so that's like my only exposure to them. They're MLs. Oh, okay, good. Yeah. Then I would say join them. They don't have much of a presence where I am. So if they have a presence where you are, that's awesome. I think that's really cool. Domestic, okay. Epstein, okay. We can take a look at some of this stuff. Epstein does not interest me. You guys know that. I know they're what the PSL split from. I do know that. I remember that. I'm looking for my charger. Ah! Is this making you guys dizzy when I walk around with my computer like this? We don't like the Trotskyists because we believe that the Trotskyists basically stand in the way of like oh, my charger was right next to me. Jesus. Of progress, of us wanting to accomplish things. This idea that the only way communism can work is in a forever revolution, it's very dangerous for people. It leads to a nearly imperialist position, as imperialist as you can get from not being capitalist anyway. And it halts real progress. And when you look at like the progress that Marxist-Leninist parties have made in other countries, everywhere they've been in power, right? Literacy rates have gone up, life expectancy has gone up, people have been lifted out of poverty. It's like anybody fighting against that, I can't in good conscience say you're fighting for something I am, right? So that's kind of our thing. Okay, let me see. Yeah, the Epstein stuff doesn't interest me because I'm just like, oh, it's business as usual. To me, I'm like, okay, yeah, rich guy, horrible to young women. Let's just see what's up on Politico. I'm on a Politico kick lately. Trump's golden age has arrived for the top 10%. This is interesting to me. And this is interesting to me too. Okay. Oh, we have more on Ukraine and Russia. That's interesting as well, but that's not domestic. So do you guys want to look at this one? Trump's golden age has arrived for the top 10%, or we'd be cooked. Trump and Lindell test Minnesota's GOP optimism. Either. I'm kind of interested in this economy one because I think this is going to be about the economy. Yeah, that's how I feel with the Epstein stuff. I'm like, yeah, rich guys manipulate money. They work hand in hand with government intelligence services. Rich guys and the government are like this under capitalism, and they're all horrible to young girls and boys. Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. So I'm going to go big again. So this is the time to talk amongst yourselves or make fun of me because I can't see. Now, oh, actually, I bet if I move the chat over here, I will be able to. Oh my God. Whole new world unlocked, chat. Whole new world unlocked. All right. I can see you guys talk now while I do this. What? So, Donald Trump's economy has exceeded expectations his first year back in office, mainly for America's wealthiest households, that is. This is so wild to me because this is the worst economic year of my life. The second worst economic year of my life. I'm sorry. The first worst economic year of my life was the first year of Donald Trump's first presidency, 2017. Everybody I know is like, this is the worst economic year of my life. So yeah, it's happy to know that the rich people are loving it, I guess, because this is hell on earth for all of us. The top 10% of U.S. earners spent $20 trillion through the first half of 2025, nearly matching the $22 trillion shelled out by everybody else. According to the Royal Bank of Canada. That splurge has been primed by a buoyant stock market, elevated real estate prices, and solid wage gains for the wealthy. Bank of America says its top account holders saw take-home pay climb 4% over the last year, while income growth for poorer households grew just 1.4%. I don't even know how it grew 1.4%, if I'm being perfectly honest. Everything is fucked for everybody. Yeah, great economy as long as you don't need to buy groceries. Exactly. This is insane. That spending power has kept Trump's economy humming. The Commerce Department on Tuesday reported that the U.S. grew at an eye-popping rate of 4.3% during the third quarter, thanks to a surge in personal consumption. I'm going to say personal consumption, they have to just mean we're spending more on groceries, right? Like, we're not buying more shit. I know that. Nobody's shopping. So is it literally just that they made the shit we need to live so expensive that it looks like we're buying more because it's based on dollar? That's like, right? It's horrible. The president labeled this a sign that the Trump economic golden age is in full steam ahead. But the robust numbers mask the extent to which the wealthy are driving growth. And while business leaders from Manhattan to South Florida are bullish on the outlook, it's the roaring 20s here in Palm Beach County, said Douglas Evans, the president of the Palm Beach Chamber of Commerce. That view is not shared by most voters. No shit. Okay. This is like offensive. Like, I'm mad reading this. Are you guys mad reading this? I'm mad reading this. In survey after survey, a majority of Americans say they're straining under the pressure of rising living expenses and a softening job market. The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston says low-income consumers have substantially higher levels of credit card debt than they previously did before the pandemic. Even as growth and asset prices soar, Trump's approval ratings are sagging. For some of his allies, that's baffling. I'm mystified by the whole argument around affordability. I just can't quite get my arms around it because it's a really, really strong economy right now, said economist Stephen Moore, a former Trump advisor who has aided the administration in its messaging. If the trends continue as they have over the last 6 months, it's going to be harder and harder for the Democrats to sustain this narrative that it's not a good economy. People are fucking dying. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, the rich have all the money. That's why. To be sure, many of the traditional hallmarks of a broadly healthy economy are there. Business is booming for Wall Street, banks, and law firms, with investors plowing hundreds of billions of dollars into risky artificial intelligence startups that have minted a new crop of billionaires. By one, like, of course, the AI billionaires, yeah. By one estimate, merger and acquisition activity will hit $2.3 trillion in 2025. That's them creating monopolies, by the way. A 49% jump over last year's tally, with the benefits disproportionately flowing to high net worth investors. Corporate profits soared by more than $166 billion in the third quarter, up from the $6.8 billion increase reported during the previous 3 months. I don't even understand this. What corporations are profiting? Because I'm telling you, like, I have a worker collective, right? Our business, stagnant, fucked, bad, down. Average people are not spending money. It's so gnarly. Oh, here we go. Never mind. We figured out who's making money. I just needed to read the next sentence. Luxury hotels, Swiss watches, and premium credit cards remain in strong demand. I'm going to scream. Like, what? This is so fucked. They're laughing in our faces. They're like, economy's going great. Swiss watches and luxury hotels are booming. Richard Ramsden, a managing director and partner at Goldman Sachs who oversees its big bank investment research unit, told reporters earlier this month that the leaders of banks and asset management firms believe the U.S. is on solid footing. And the narrative around the so-called K-shaped economy, which refers to when rich people's finances are improving as poor people's finances shrink, is kind of not backed up by the data. What? While wealthier consumers are spending more, B of A's data found that spending growth among lower income households is also rated positive. Yeah, because you made rent fucking 90% of people's income. You made groceries twice as expensive. Nobody's saving anything, and they're all spending on credit cards and then defaulting on the credit cards. I'm pretty sure 2025 has seen the highest default. Let me look this up, though. 2025 credit card default rates. There's something I saw that it's like, oh yeah, the broad continuing rise in credit card delinquency. So the credit card default rate went up from 12.6 in third quarter of 2022 to 20%. It's probably even worse now, though. I saw somebody say that it was the highest. Oh yeah, U.S. delinquency rates are climbing in 2025 across key consumer credit segments. So everybody's spending money on credit cards, everybody's poor, and then just defaulting on their credit cards. Like, hello, this is what's going on. Separately, while analysts at the S&P Global expect consumer spending to moderate next year, they also say U.S. households are sitting on multi-decade strong balance sheets. Administration officials are also, I want to say, I own my house. This is like what they mean by this, a balance sheet. So I have no money. I have maxed out credit cards. I have $0 in savings. I'm thinking about defaulting on my credit cards because I'm just like, fuck it. These people are evil. Like, I hate them. And I would be able to save money if I defaulted on my credit cards. Like, that's my financial situation. If you looked at my finances on paper, I would have a strong balance sheet because I own my house and my house is going up in value. They're talking about inflated home ownership rates, but I'm not going to sell my house. If I sold my house, I couldn't afford to live anywhere else. So, like, it doesn't fucking matter to me how much my house is appreciating in value. Like, that doesn't help my day to day. So this thing they're looking at, it's like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like 30 some odd % of poor people own their own homes. Their homes going up in value is not going to significantly help them unless they are fleeing the country to go move somewhere cheaper. That is the only time in which that is going to help people. Like, the average American is in my position. Like, debt, no savings. They probably don't even own a house, so it doesn't even fucking matter. But those of us who do, it's like, that's the only thing making our balance sheet look higher. Our house is worth more, but we can't afford to sell it because we can't afford to buy a new house that costs like twice as much. So it's just like useless, you know? It's totally useless. And I racked up credit card debt on necessities. I spent my savings on necessities, like not frivolous spending, nothing like this. And it happened fast. In October of last year, like a year ago, in October of last year, I had a savings account. And then by the end of November, it was gone on emergencies. And then by March, credit cards were maxed out on emergencies as well. And like, this is not how I usually live. You guys know, if you followed me, I wrote a whole book about getting out of debt, staying out of debt. Like, my life is as a debt-free person. I have been pushed to such financial extremities by how fucked the market is that now I'm doing this shit just to survive. And like, you know, it's nothing I haven't navigated before. I'm used to being a broke person. It's not like I was ever rich before, right? But, you know, I was more comfortable than this, certainly. It's absolutely wild. Yeah, own our houses. We're paying mortgages on them still, though. Yes, totally. Own your home, currently default, all on credit cards. Yes, like, these people are crazy if they think that we're rich. And the funniest part is I get on the internet and I see people tell me I'm a wealthy person and a millionaire while this is happening. I'm like, babe, I have $12. What are we talking about? Like, it's just crazy. These people are so crazy. Yeah. So, all right. So let's see. Administration officials are optimistic that the mood will improve if the president's tax policies, including new deductions for business and hourly workers, lead to more hiring and higher take-home pay. And there's hope that measures like the creation of Trump-branded investment accounts for newborns and the expansion of investment offerings for retirement plans will position working-class Americans to capture more of Wall Street's upside. I'm going to also tell you, almost every single person I know who had a retirement account cashed it out early and took the penalty to help them get through and just pay day-to-day expenses. Steve Bannon, who served as Trump's chief strategist during his first term, said the president needs to hammer relentlessly on how the economy is expanding and that higher wages will come from supply-side tax cuts from his one big beautiful bill, which passed in July. We know this will not happen. Supply-side economics is a joke. It's a scam. It's ridiculous. Cash out your 401k too. Yes, so many people I know did this. So wild. So robust economic growth, more and better jobs raises. That's what MAGA voted for. That's what they expect, Bannon said in an interview. That message may ring hollow if the economy continues along its current trajectory. Analysts are cautioning that consumer spending could soften if hiring remains slow and unemployment, which ticked up to 4.6% last month, continues to rise. So 4.6 is a lot, right? So that's like what? Basically 5%. That's 5 out of every 100 people. That's more than 1 out of every 50 people you know is looking for a job. That's crazy. The JP Morgan Chase Institute found that income growth was weak this year, particularly for older workers, and that balances remained flat among the bank's account holders. The American Financial Services Association, which represents consumer credit firms, warned earlier this month that lenders are bracing for deterioration in loan performance as subprime borrowers show signs of stress. At the Yale CEO conference in Manhattan last week, Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller, a finalist in the sweepstakes to become the next chair of the central bank, described how the financial divide has accelerated since spring. Wages aren't moving. Surpluses are gone. Bank accounts are closer to like day-to-day paychecks. Yes, and that's what happened to me. Now I'm paycheck to paycheck again. I wasn't paycheck to paycheck for 2 years. I had 2 years not being paycheck to paycheck. Now I'm paycheck to paycheck. Former St. Louis Fed economist told a room full of corporate executives gathered at a Ziegfeld ballroom. Everyone talks about how loose financial conditions are. They're loose for everybody in this room, I guarantee it, he said, referring to the ease with which high-end consumers can secure credit. If you go out to the sort of Main Street, middle America that I'm from, these people don't see cheap financing. They see high mortgage rates, high car loans, high credit card rates. They're not saying financing is cheap. Even so, Trump officials have heartened have been heartened by recent data showing meaningful wage growth for non-supervisory workers over the last year. And while sentiment has lagged, a stronger than expected holiday retail season, along with solid sales growth for larger retailers, suggest Americans are still spending at a healthy clip. Real wage growth will also accelerate if inflation continues to decline. That, to me, is a recipe for a more broad-based, durable economy that's not so fixated on the high end. Okay, wow. So, fuck these people. It's pretty brutal. It's very depressing. Like, I do not know anybody doing well financially right now except for my partner because they're on contract at this job. And even then, they weren't able to find a job before that for forever. And so they had to pay back credit card debt they accumulated while they were unemployed and looking. Like, this is like not... This is the crisis of capitalism. Right? They will look at what's going on for the richest people in the room and tell you things are going great. And I have long suspected that buoyed numbers for spending, it's because they are overcharging you on essentials. So, of course, we're spending more. We're not saving anything. We're spending more. But people aren't shopping. Like, do you guys shop? Like, I don't shop. Who shops? Who buys anything non-essential? You have one of the few entry-level jobs that pay well and it's getting bad. Yeah. Economy sucks right now. Homeless and jobless for almost this whole year. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. You can't shop. You're poor. Like, I remember 2 years ago, I would buy things once in a while. Once every 3 months, I'd buy, I'll buy this thing I like. You know, I would shop a little. Yeah, no, now, not at all. Not at all. I don't have money. I can't shop. $5. It's like, yeah, literally I have like $12 to my name. It's absolutely wild. Groceries on your credit card. I mean, this is the position that we're in. And considering moving in with your parents, this is shit I have not seen since the Great Recession, how bad it is. Nothing. There's nothing. It's absolutely wild. So, like, I'm a part of a worker collective. We have a small business. Like, this is the first year in 12 years. We've been in business 14 years. This is the first year in 12 years where there are certain weeks where I'm like, I got to skip my paycheck because we don't have the money because people aren't shopping. And I even removed payment plan and layaway from our website because at this point I feel like it's unethical. Like, I took it off our website. I was like, this is fucked. Like, I can't even do this to people in good conscience. You know? It's absolutely wild. It's like, you use your credit cards for essentials. Exactly. And that's the position we're in. That's the position I found myself in. It is really, really gnarly out there. And these people are telling you to their faces what their priorities are. That's the thing. The capitalist ruling class is telling you to their faces. The economy's doing great. All the rich guys are getting richer. They're saying it to us. And it's like, how are we not supposed to be enraged by this? Like, fuck these people. First time in your life struggling with credit card debt. I mean, look, I want to tell you guys, you're not alone. Yeah, I have a Twitch. Hi. You're not alone. You are not alone if you're going through it. Like, solidarity, you are not alone. This is not your fault. Because I know one of the biggest things about finances is shame. So, like, I come from an aggressively working class background. You know, my family struggled with money my whole life. I finally got to a place where I was kind of financially stable. Even when I wrote my book about personal finances and capitalism and how they relate, I said, like, I might not be in this position forever. One emergency and I'm back where I started. Guess what? My one emergency fucking happened. My 3 emergency had happened back to back. And now I'm back where I started. And, like, that is the truth that we all know. This system is doing this to you. Like, it's not that you fucked up. It's not that you made mistakes. It's, you know, even if you did make a mistake, the amount of mistakes you could make could never compare to the overall structural, like, harm and violence that our financial system does to everyday working people. Like, so you just have to remember, whatever shame you feel, whatever guilt you feel about your finances, fuck it. Don't feel that way. This is not your fault. You know, this is not your fault. These people are doing this to you. Poverty is a policy decision. They could turn this around tomorrow if they wanted to. You know, it's bad. It's brutal. Yeah, so what are your options? Tenants unions are a great option. You can unite with other workers in your building. You guys can come together. Yes. I support this. Form a tenants union. Fight back against rent raises. You know, look, we got a lot of traction for socialist political candidates running. Electoral politics isn't going to save us. We know that. But what electoral politics can do, if actual socialists are running, I'm not talking about democratic socialists. I'm not talking about Democrats who are like, I want to give you this much and then fuck you over this much more in secret, haha. I'm not talking about that shit. I'm talking about actual socialists.
They know they're not going to be able to save you in an electoral system. But the least they can do is push to like move the Overton window further left. They can use that platform and that podium to tell you, you do deserve basic things. You deserve for housing to be a human right. You deserve to have a guaranteed right to work. You deserve a $30 an hour minimum wage job. Like, they can push that conversation away from this. Because right now, everyone just thinks it's normal what's happening. And it's not fucking normal. So things you can do, yeah. Unionize your workplace. Right? That's great. Create a tenants union if you're a renter with your other renters. Start aggressively pushing for socialism to be more commonly accepted in public spaces, because socialism is the only thing that's going to save us from this. It is. Support socialist political candidates if they're running. Not talking about democratic socialists. You know, just keep it actual socialists, right, where you are. This is the stuff you can do to fight back. It's limited. It's hard. Boycotting, I mean, right now I do the BDS boycott list. General strikes, if you hear about a general strike, like, general strikes will stop this, right? Like, rich people, they're all making money off someone. It's you, it's me, it's all of us. It's day-to-day, average, everyday workers. Even as somebody who's part of a worker collective and owns my own house, rich people are still fucking making money off me. You know why? Because there's an Amazon fucking distribution center down the street from my house that uses my tax dollars that fund our infrastructure in our neighborhood for their shitty ass stupid fucking Amazon trucks to be driving down the street every single day. Like, no matter what your position, these rich people are profiting off of you. So if you hear about a general strike, jump on that, support that. A general strike is good. You know, it's really time. It's really time to push back against these people. And again, electoral politics aren't going to save us, but it is one way to engage in a multifaceted way. And it reaches the people who aren't super politically motivated. The people like your mom and dad who are like, well, this is just how it always has been. And they don't realize that's not true and it could be better. Like, electoral politics gets through to those people. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt, but push it nonetheless. Like, out here in California, we have the Vote Socialist thing. I'm a volunteer on that. It's cool. And it's cool talking to people who don't usually think about politics that way, because it expands their mind and makes them think like, this isn't normal and this is fucked and things could be better. And if you're talking to people and you're trying to get them on board with socialism, make them hate capitalism, the one thing I've found to be the most successful, right, in getting through to these people is reminding them that this is getting ridiculous. That's what I tell them. I'm like, this is getting ridiculous. We're making fucking trillionaires for what? And people can't afford to feed their kids. Like, come on. This is just not common sense at this point. Like, this is just bizarre and strange. It's a clown. It's a circus at this point. And that they agree with. They don't have to be socialists. It doesn't matter if they're left wing, if they're right wing. They're like, this is too much. This is too much. This is out of control a little bit. And that does get through to people. So if you're talking to people, you know, yeah, tell them. You shocked your neighbor when you said Americans don't have work contracts. Yeah, most Americans don't even know right to work. Like, oh, we're fucked, like, on that. Like, in other countries, you can't even get fired willy-nilly. Your company has to show, like, posting downward profit to fire people. It's actually something we use at our business. We only lay people off when we're, like, posting downward numbers, you know, and that shocks people, but that's very standard in other companies. Yeah, it's absolutely wild. So, I'm so mad, so angry right now. Yeah, at will employment, that's standard in the United States. That's not standard other places, right? So I think general strikes, boycotts are good. General strikes are great. General strikes have a track record in the United States of being very effective. Tenants unions are good. Workplace unions are good. These things are helpful. You know, something has to happen. Yeah, free buses aren't going to save LA. Okay, wait. All right. So Spring Melon asked earlier, can I ask off-topic questions here, or do you want to keep it focused? It depends. You can ask a question, and we can maybe talk about it if you guys want. Sorry, just checking my phone notifications to make sure I'm not going too far over time. The UAW is planning a general strike for 2028. That's great. A lot of time for people to prepare. That's really good. That's really good. Okay. 15 people get fired this week. Yeah, I mean, when we have to lay people off at our job, it's considered like a crisis. I'm like, people are like crying. Like, this is like, oh, like, this is people's fucking lives, you know? And these people just do it willy-nilly. They don't give a fuck. Is there somewhere I can read David's PhD thesis? I don't know. His PhD's from Claremont. He was getting it at University of Chicago, but then he moved back to LA, and they created a custom program for him at Claremont College. So if you look, his name's David Roberts, Claremont College, you can probably find it. But it's funny because they actually created a custom program for him because he was considered more high tier than them, which is cool. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be this way. Totally. It's like this. The thing I think about a lot is I think about that quote, that Marx quote. It's like, we've got a world to win. Like, we can do it. Your cultural studies PhD too? Okay, yeah, you should look it up. Yeah, because David got his master's at Claremont, and then he went to University of Chicago, and he had some personal stuff happen in his life that I'm not going to get into because that's his story to tell if he wants to, but it was a big deal. Something personally happened. So he had to come back to California, and he was like, well, I don't know what to do about my PhD now. It's on hold. And Claremont actually reached out to him, and they were like, hey, if you want to do your PhD here, we don't have a PhD in philosophy, but we have a PhD in cultural studies, and we can personally tier a program for you. And David was like, well, if I have to be in California anyway, like, yeah, I'll just do that. So that's kind of what happened there. Christmas or New Year's, can we do longer streams? No, I have to be with, maybe on New Year's, but on Christmas, I have to spend it with my partner. My partner is like, I'm more of a Christmas person than me. But today, maybe we can. Today, we can do a little bit longer. I'm like enraged. This year has been so hard for so many people I know, and seeing that, it just like feels like a knife in your chest, you know? I'm like gonna cry. I'm just like, fuck these people, man. Yeah, absolutely wild. Highlight my message. Oh, cute for Christmas or New Year's. Yeah. Ugh. Merry Christmas, David. I'm citing your hidden work. I'll find you. I'll tell him. Yeah, you should. I'm gonna hang out with David, I think, on Christmas too. We might all go to Cantor's here in LA. That's like a Christmas tradition for the familyless. Oh, you successfully converted your friends to be DPRK supporters. Nice. Yeah, we do need to be livid. This is not okay. Do I think it's okay for commies to be manager, works in sales? Yes. I think if you're a communist, almost every job is okay as long as it's not being a cop or working for the defense, like the military industrial complex. I have complicated feelings about communism and the military. I think a lot of service people get radicalized by their experiences in the military and leave with left-wing politics. I was just at a Venezuela action a couple weeks ago that Veterans for Peace was at, and I think that's very, very important, and I think that the working class needs the military on our side strategically. I think strategically we do. I don't think that means dismissing war crimes, dismissing their complacency in the imperial machine, but a lot of people who come from that background and it fucks them up, they will tell you, like, I am complicit in this. Like, I am forever trying to atone for my sins of being involved in that. Yeah. Non-defense aerospace, that's like, I think that's probably fine. Everything we do gets used in some fucked up way, so you just use your best judgment. The Italian prime minister said 2026 is going to be worse. Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, we have to stop living in echo chambers and be more active. That's really true. And that's why I don't condemn people who try to recruit from liberals or even from conservatives. We need more people on our side, So I think that's like the most important thing we can do is like just talk to people. And again, when I'm canvassing and I talk to people about politics, Republicans and Democrats alike are both sick of this shit, and that really tells you, like, because it's not red versus blue, right? It's them versus us. It's the few rich guys in the United States who are like, business is booming, Swiss watches and luxury hotel stays, while the rest of us fucking put groceries on credit cards. Like, fuck these people, Yeah. If you can reach the closeted leftists that are still voting Democrat, if you can reach the Republicans who only became a Republican because they hate the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, like anybody, Yeah. Anything you can do to reach these people, now is the time. And again, the thing that gets through to them isn't talking about class. It isn't talking about the owning class or the proletariat. Followers, 1,200. Yay. We met a follower goal. That stuff doesn't get through to people. What gets through to people is quite literally just being like, this is getting out of control. Like, what do you mean there's a trillionaire? I know people putting groceries on credit cards. what the actual fuck? Like, this is just, it's too much. It's out of hand. And what that tells people is that, like, they're like, I'm fine with a little, like, most average people are like, I'm fine with my boss earning more money than me. Like, I think doctors should earn more money than the average person. That's fine. They're not super radical. They're not super there yet, whatever. But even those people are like, no, this is too much. Come on. This is fucking insane, right? People can't afford houses. If the minimum wage had kept up with inflation, like, this is another one. Let's actually do this. Let's look this up. Okay. Minimum wage, we'll say what, 1965? Was $1.25 per hour. Okay. Average, we'll say median house price, 1965, was $20,000, right? Okay, so 165, we'll say 20,700 divided by 165. So it would have taken you 12,545 hours of work, right? Is that what that is, to buy a house in 1965? 12,545. That's how many hours of work. There's 1080 hours in a year. So you would have been able to buy a house with basically 11 years worth of income. Is that correct? No, this is how many hours. Yeah, hours. Okay. So today, minimum wage, we're just going to take it $7.25, right? Median U.S. house price. $423. That's how many hours it would take you to buy the average house. Or 1040. So, yeah, in 1965, if you had a minimum wage job, you would have been able to buy a house with 11 years worth of your wages. Today, it would be 54 years of your wages for the median priced house. $725 since 2009. Yeah. And that's just absolutely wild. So what's that? Divided by 11 or whatever. 5 times. So our minimum wage should technically be 5 times higher to have the same purchasing power it did in 1965. So our minimum wage should be like $35 an hour at this point. You know? That's what it should be if it was the same as in 1965. And that kind of stuff can help people too really understand. But you have to think of an easy way to talk to them about it. To be like, I don't know, like, this is not the way things used to be, right? This is not how things have always been. In 1965, you could buy a house. If you had a minimum wage job, it would take 11 years of your labor to buy a house outright. Okay, that's kind of a lot, but whatever. Today, to buy the same house on minimum wage, it would take you 54 years of labor. Like, that's not normal. That's not fucking normal. What's it going to be in 10 years? What's it going to be in 20 years? Like, what are we doing? And that kind of stuff is what gets through to people. Yeah, China's purchasing power parity surpassed us. Yeah, their GDP, according to PPP, surpassed us. Yep. It's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. It was easier convincing your grandma to be a commie than some of your friends. I mean, yeah, because they remember. They know. They know it wasn't always like this. In 20 years, you don't think the USA will exist. I mean, the Soviet Union's collapse did kill the safety net. It did. We had something we had a buffer. We had something that was like, you can't go too high because then people will think communism looks really good. And what they did is they just tried to convince us China was evil and bad or China's not communist. That was how they try to mitigate that with China. They got rid of the USSR. Okay. So now, so we don't look at China and go, why don't we have that? They'll take 2 approaches. They'll be like, well, China's communist and evil, actually. So you could have that, but then they kill you if you mention Winnie the Pooh or whatever the fuck they come up with. Or they'll be like, well, China has that because it's capitalist. See, it's capitalist. It's not communist. So that's what capitalism does for you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, that's their technique, but it's not true. China is not capitalist. China is doing Marxist-Leninism just like the USSR did, and look what it does. And that's the thing. And that's why I get so mad at these other leftists who get on the internet and try to tell you China's not socialist. It's like, who are you fucking helping, man? They are, first of all. It's wrong. But second of all, what is your goal? Like, what? You're doing Fed shit. Right? That's what's so weird. Yeah. And, like, this is the thing I always tell people, too. I always tell people this, but I'll do it on here, too, because we can. Why not? So I'll show you this. Basically, if you look up principles of communism, this is what I always ask people about China. This is the thing I always ask people about. You go down to principles of communism, you go to section 18. What will be the course of this revolution? And they talk about what's like a socialist revolution. What happens next? So you have a socialist revolution. What happens next? What happens? Here we go. It establishes a democratic constitution. Yes, that basically says the direct or indirect dominance of the proletariat. People, when they talk about the DPRK's constitution, by the way, they're like, why does it say the Workers' Party has all the control? I don't know. Maybe because that's the direct dominance of the proletariat. Like, what? Like, yeah, that's what you want. Okay. So this is talking a lot about England, you know, because that's kind of where originally Marx and Engels thought socialism would pop off. That didn't happen, obviously. So they say democracy would be wholly valueless if the proletariat were not immediately using it as a means for putting through measures directed against private property and ensuring the livelihood of the proletariat. The main measures emerging as the necessary result of existing relations. This is important. Emerging as the necessary result of existing relations. So this just means when you have a socialist revolution and you're in capitalism, you got existing shit you got to deal with. You got to mitigate, but you can't burn it all down right away, right? So these are the necessary result of existing relations, and this is what they say, okay? And this is what I always tell people. Which of these 12 points laid out here do you think China's not doing? And they can never answer because China's doing them. China's doing every single one of them, okay? So let's get into this here. Number 1, limitation of private property. Remember, private property, not personal property, right? Everybody knows that. Personal property is yours. Like, I own my house. That's personal property. I own it. I live in it. Private property is something you own just to make money off of. It's privatized property. It's when you own a business for the sake of profiting off of it, not to work in the business along with other people and you all take it together. No, like, it's when you own something to make profit off of. When you own an apartment building and you're making profit off of people's, like, rent, right? That's private property, privatized property. So limitation of that privatized property through progressive taxation, heavy inheritance tax, abolition of inheritance through collateral lines, brothers, nephews, etc., forced loans, etc. So that China's doing. And sometimes people will be like, socialism isn't just heavy taxation. Well, no, but it's the first step of it. Heavy taxation is an employed first step of it. And these people, these ultras who want to tell you that's not socialism, well, that's not what Marx and Engels thought, okay? Yeah, basically when somebody's a landlord, you've privatized property for your own profit. Yep, that's bad. We don't want that. Number 2, gradual expropriation of landowners, industrialists, railroad magnates, and ship owners, partly through competition by state industry and partly directly through compensation in the form of bonds. So this is like state-owned enterprises, basically, right? So this is when you're, I'll make this bigger, sorry. I forgot you guys have a hard time seeing it on your small screens. So this basically means 2 things. You're going to compete with these privately owned landlords, industrialists, rail and transportation people, basically. One, by the state creating their own version of this, public housing, publicly run corporations, companies, public transportation, right? That's competition by state industry. And also through just buying in with bonds or stock ownership into these. So this is what we see with China. China now has increased its ownership shares of these big public companies in this major way. And they're also providing public housing as competition. So yeah, that's what's up there. Number 3, confiscation of the possessions of immigrants and rebels against the majority of people. That means if you leave the country, your shit stays. You leave, your shit stays. That's what that means, okay? They did that. You left the country, fine, run away. We keep your land, we keep your property. The people who are still here use it. Organization of labor or employment of proletarians on publicly owned land in factories and workshops, with competition among the workers being abolished, and with factory owners, insofar as they still exist, being obliged to pay the same high wages as those paid by the state. So this is just introducing state-run facilities. This is what people want to be like, oh, it's state capitalism. That is quite literally step 3 of the transition phase. That is what you want to do. So this is, publicly owned farms, publicly owned companies, and China has a lot of those as well. So China has outright publicly owned companies, right? And then they also are buying into privately owned companies like that. Point number 2, right? Purchasing up stocks and stuff. So number 5 here, an equal obligation on all members of society to work until such time as private property has been completely abolished. Formation of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. So this just basically means if you're able to work, you need to work for your living, right? That's what you need to do. So you can't just own a company and make money drawing off the profit from that company and not laboring in it as well. You have to at least work in the company if you're making money at it. Hydrate. Thank you. Oop. Centralization of money and credit in the hands of the state through a national bank with state capital and the suppression of private banks and bankers. They're working on it. You've seen they've started cracking down hard on private bankers over there. Increase the number of national factories, workshops, railroads, ships, bring new lands into cultivation, and improvement of land already under cultivation, all in proportion growth to the capital and labor force at the disposal of the nation. You see China doing this in a major way. They're creating whole cities for labor forces to come into. They're reforesting huge amounts of land. Like, they are definitely doing this. They are bringing new lands into cultivation. They're improving lands already under cultivation, right? They're changing the actual topography and landscape to be better accommodated for workers. I've said in an early podcast episode, China is capitalist because yes, they're capitalist, but operating under the mode. So this is kind of a complicated thing. So that's changed also. 80% of their companies are no longer private. They change really, really rapidly. Now, 60% of their companies have some sort of public investment in them, at least. Since I recorded that changed. So that's cool. But China will tell you they're still currently capitalist. They will tell you that. They will tell you they expect to be in a state of socialism by 2050. 2050. But the form of capitalism that they're operating in is state capitalism. But state capitalism is considered the first stage of socialism, right? That according to Lenin. So it's confusing because if you've never read Marx, there's a difference between a country being under socialist leadership and doing capitalism, but that's still, we consider that part of the communist process, right? Then capitalists being in charge and doing capitalism. So one of the things that I realized from being on the internet more and talking to people is that your rhetoric matters. So I used to be the kind of person that's like, well, we've never fully reached communism anywhere. You're just talking about socialism, blah, 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 blah. Until I realized that was actually being used to denounce the viability and credibility of socialist projects. I used to also tell people, like, yeah, China's still in a state of capitalism, but like, they want to be in a state of socialism by 2050, whatever. They're still doing capitalism right now, though. Not realizing that people didn't understand that itself was a stage of communist leadership under Marxism. And now the reason you don't hear me say it like that so much anymore is I'm like, oh shit, I didn't realize people didn't understand what Marxism was. I didn't realize people didn't understand that that's a part of the process. So now I'll just tell people China's communist, China's socialist. But when you talk to people from China, they'll tell you we're still doing capitalism. They'll tell you that. They'll be like, yeah, we have the Communist Party and we're still doing capitalism and we're moving into socialism soon. So that's kind of the way I used to explain it to people too. But I don't feel like that explanation for the average American gets through in the right way. So I switched up my language on that a lot. So now I tell people when I explain it in more detail, you'll hear. Also, one of the things that's helped is having longer time limits on things to talk about things. Like with TikTok, you can record longer now than back then. And with the podcast, we made the podcast longer, etc. But yeah, so I would say that even though the numbers have shifted since I recorded that episode, China is still currently in a state of capitalism. But since it's under communist and socialist leadership, the thing that's changed is I now find it more worthwhile to tell people that is communism and socialism because they don't understand the other way, if that makes sense. They're like, so it's capitalist then. But it's like, well, no, it's doing capitalism in a way that communism and socialism tells you to do capitalism. Let me know if I explained that correctly. I can start at the beginning and do a longer one if you want. Did that make sense? Did I explain that well? I can do, okay, so all right, so here's the thing. So under Marxist theory, every society naturally moves through different, okay, that made sense to you, okay. All right, but I'll explain it for the people who don't get it. So in Marxist society, sorry, Zay's here now, walking on the computer. I hope she doesn't close it. Oh, you're laying on the computer. No, Zay, you can't lay on the computer, little one. We're back. She said, meow, when I picked her up. Okay, so under Marxist theory, this is how society functions. You have something he called primitive communism, whatever, and then it gives way to a feudalism once agriculture becomes developed. So then agriculture does well, feudalism does well, but a lot of people are oppressed. Peasants are oppressed, right? And feudalism, and also slowly a new merchant class starts to develop under like mercantilism, and merchants actually will lead what we call a bourgeois revolution. And they'll be like, hey, this feudalism thing isn't good for us, the merchants. So they'll lead like a merchant revolution, basically. And that'll bring us to capitalism. And then from capitalism, eventually the workers will get really, really oppressed by the merchants. And then they will lead a revolution. And that will lead us to socialism. That's the worker revolution. The proletarian revolution will lead us to socialism. Now, what ended up happening is that Marx said that is where you'd get a socialist revolution at that stage. No, Kit Kit, come here. So what ended up happening, though, is that people in feudalist society started having worker revolutions and socialist revolutions. Oh, my God. Look, it opened like iMusic, Apple Music on my computer. Jesus. So when that happened, they kind of were in this pickle because you had workers now in control, but society was at the feudalism stage. It hadn't yet advanced through capitalism. So they were like, we have to do capitalism first before we can get to socialism. So then what you would have is basically a system of capitalism being controlled by communists, by socialists. And Lenin called this state capitalism. And Lenin actually realized this with the new economic policy at NEP and was like, we got to go back. We got to start over. We got to do more capitalism. Deng realized this in China with the Dengist reforms. Don't come here. You can't do that. So this is these places being like, we got to do more capitalism shit. But that is part of Marxist-Leninist ideology, right? So Lenin was like the first stage of socialism, especially for places where you have your revolutions in a feudal state, is going to be a form of capitalism. It's state capitalism because you have to get through that capitalist stage before you can do socialism. Now, when you talk to China, they're like, yeah, we're doing capitalism. We had to build up all this shit under capitalism before we could get into socialism, which is part of Marxist doctrine. And if you looked at the paper I sent in my bulletin board, actually, it's the book Public Opinion by Lippmann. He's not a socialist. This came out in 1922, the same year that Lenin introduced that new economic policy, the NEP, that was supposed to backslide them into more capitalism so they could grow to socialism. He actually says, well, now, Lenin's giving up on socialism, going back to capitalism, but he even makes a point and says, which is accurate according to Marxist dogma. And he calls it dogma because he's not a Marxist, but he's correct. You do need to do that. You cannot jump from feudalism to socialism and bypass capitalism. It will not work. And anyone that's tried that has seen that it doesn't work. And then they go, oh, shit, we got to go back and we got to do the whole capitalism thing. So when we say, for example, China is still doing capitalism, that's what they say. They're like, we're still doing capitalism, but they're doing it in a Marxist way under Marxist leadership. And now the prevailing conversation and rhetoric style says it's not really useful for us to call that capitalism because it's not the same kind of capitalism that the United States is doing, that Europe is doing. And when we say that, it basically makes people not understand Marxism. So now people will not even separate between socialism and communism as two different stages. They won't separate between state capitalism and socialism as two different stages. Rhetorically in the West, we'll just say it is communism. Boom. And that's been a change I've made in my language because I've come to understand why people did that, because it was correct. It confused people. It confused them a lot. They're like, see, so it is capitalism. And it's like, well, no, they're doing it, but in a Marxist way to get to this end goal. So in China, because they don't have to worry about that, everyone knows what Marxism is, they'll be like, yeah, we're still doing capitalism right now, with the understanding being we're going into socialism by 2050 though. Do you know what that means? So like that they can talk about it like that. And if you see Chinese communists on Redno or on TikTok, they'll say that. That's how they'll talk about it. But we here in the West, I do think maybe we have an obligation to use our language differently because of where we're at and what we're working with people out here. And that's why I made the shift in how I explain that now, back compared to back then. Yeah. So yeah, does that make more sense? I wasn't paying attention to the chat, but thank you, Cloud Frog, first time chat. Oh, don't touch my eyes. I know, I've got the fucking glasses on, thank God. I try not to touch her, but you got it sometimes. So yes, okay, good. Okay, I'm glad that makes sense. So that is a shift though. You'll hear in my older content, I would be more pedantic about like, well, that's socialism, not communism, and they're doing capitalism right now. And now I'm just like, you know what? I've seen the error of my ways. That's not a useful way to talk in the United States. So I have shifted how I talk about that, and you'll see that. All right. So over here, we were back on this. We're going into number 8. All right. And Education of all children from the moment they can leave their mother's care in national establishments at national cost. Education and production together. So they have public child care in China, and also free public education is a very important part of this as well. Pretty easy. Next, construction on public lands of great palaces as communal dwellings for associated groups of citizens engaged in both industry and agriculture and combining their way of life, the advantages of urban and rural conditions while avoiding the one-sidedness and drawbacks of each. So this is basically, like, Marx had this idea about, like, suburbanizing things. I don't love that idea. But I would say that arguably this is what China is doing when they build those intentional communities out in kind of suburban areas next to rural and next to industry developed places, with the community centers in them and the public cantinas and the living quarters all around them. That's what I would argue is their interpretation of that to this. So then we have destruction of all unhealthy and jerry-built dwellings in urban districts. They've been doing great infrastructure work, very obviously, including in housing. And these last two aren't super relevant. Equal inheritance rights for children born in and out of wedlock. Yeah, okay, whatever. And the last one is concentration of means of production in the hands of the nation. I guess that one is really relevant in China because they built all that fucking high-speed rail, which is just insane how well they did with that. So this is what, if people are like, China's not communist, they're not doing communism, just send them to this, be like, which of these points do you think they're not doing? And then after this, it says, this is important. It is impossible, of course, to carry out all these measures at once, but one will always bring others in its wake. Once the first radical attack on private property has been launched, the proletariat will find itself forced to go even further, to concentrate increasingly in the hands of all state capital, all agriculture, all transport, all trade. All the foregoing measures are directed to this end, and they will become practicable and feasible, capable of producing their centralizing effects to precisely the degree that the proletariat through its labor multiplies the country's productive forces. So basically what they're saying is you can't do this all at once. It's going to be a process. It's going to take time. And that's why we can see, like, okay, China still considers themselves in a stage of capitalism, but they're working on all of these. They're making progress on all of these. And they think they will have done them all by 2050, at which point they will feel content saying they have achieved socialism. So I think that's pretty interesting. All right, so I got some questions in the chat. Let's take a look. The hypothetical higher stage of communism will be stateless, but it's mostly an analysis of definitions. Yes. So this is from the person saying what comes after socialism. Is that correct? And that person is correct. Marx posited that communism, higher stage communism, would come after what he called lower stage communism, which Engels at one point referred to lower stage communism as socialism and higher stage communism as a different thing. Today, though, similarly, that's language I used to use. Most American communists find that's not useful differences to point out. So now people just call it all communism. I've also shifted my language towards that because they made a compelling point with that, and I changed my language in that way too. So now we call it all communism, but it is true that Marx hypothesizes there's a higher stage and a lower stage. And the higher stage is after the lower stage is achieved globally, that everyone will kind of be like, oh, there's these leftover elements that can kind of wither away. And that's where he hypothesized the state would wither away. So when you see people be like, well, isn't communism itself anarchist? You're like, kind of, but not really. Not really. Because to us, the goal isn't the withering away of the state. It's something we hypothesize eventually will happen once everywhere becomes socialist. So if that makes sense. Yeah. Almost every single person you met in your entire life has always told you China is new communism. Yeah, I mean, that's a good, and I ask people honestly, because maybe they have a good argument. You never know, right? You don't know how smart the person you're talking to is. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Which of the 12 points laid out in Principles of Communism, Section 18, like, do you think they're not doing? Because when I look, I think they're doing all of them. They usually haven't read it, though. They don't know. I've never had a good answer to that. The closest thing I've had to a good answer to that was somebody saying, well, there's a reason they didn't release Principles of Communism for decades later and instead turned it into the Communist Manifesto. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but I like Principles of Communism better because it has more details. And they still wrote it, and it was the precursor for Principles of Communism. But if you want to use Principles of Communism, which of the points laid out in Principles of Communism do you think? Or if you want to use the Communist Manifesto, which do you think they're not doing from that? And then they couldn't answer either. So I'm like, okay. You know, it's very, very interesting. Yeah, I definitely think you should. I like it better than the Communist Manifesto, personally. That's what I tell people to start with when they're reading. Hold on, I have to check on my little my schedule for today. Let's see how behind I am, because somebody requested we do a longer one, and I think I can. I just have to make sure, because after this I do my volunteer work before I start real work. So I usually do volunteer work starting now, but I think I can do it. I think we can do a little longer if you guys are enjoying. How many people do we have in the chat right now? I can't see it. How many people are in the room? Can anybody tell? 167. Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, yeah. I usually get like 300 over on TikTok. So it would be cool if we could get that amount going on over here. That's kind of my goal, to get as many people here as it does there. Okay, so my question is, why does anarchism not make sense? It seems that once communism is done nationwide, then the state will dissolve. But I also understand the need of a state to protect against other dangerous nations. I mean, that's the main thing. You need to protect your revolution, right? And that's something only a state can provide. You also need to have a state to administer and implement the systems that keep people alive, things like healthcare, right? Now, eventually, when you have no threats, no external threats from other countries, right, you don't really need a state to defend yourself. Sure, maybe you've so hammered out how your healthcare system works and how you distribute these resources. At that point, the state can wither away and it becomes less and less relevant, for sure. But that's not something you want to jump into. People will die. You want to save people's lives, right? And I always say regulation saves people's lives. Bureaucracy saves people's lives. As annoying as you might think it is, it saves people's lives. So that's why we need that. Oh, posture check. Ha ha ha. What's your question about land ownership? Specifically. Posture check. Twitch, for some reason, makes me really notice how crooked I am. On TikTok, I don't notice it as much. On Twitch, something about it, I'm just like very crooked. Where can you find worker co-ops? So the most worker co-ops exist in northern Italy. Some exist in the United States. But in the United States, worker co-op is a tax designation. It doesn't actually have anything to do with their structure. So like our business is structured as a worker collective. It doesn't have a tax designation of a worker co-op though, because that makes it harder to access financing and things like that. Kind of, yeah. The problem with most anarchists is they want to jump straight into statelessness. Yes, they do. And it becomes a problem. Private property. So it depends on your definition. So how most Americans think of private property, they think it's like just stuff like I always say my big coffee cup. They're like, that's private property. This is not private property. This is personal property according to Marxist literature. So the house you own that you live in, that's personal property. So a lot of people think the communists, they want to abolish private property. They're going to take your house from you. And the answer is we don't want to do that. We want to take your house from your landlord and give it to you, right? So for you, that's personal property, your house. For your landlord, that's private property. He's privatized your housing to make money off of it. And we think that's bad. What's my opinion on the idea the revolution can't start in the imperial core? It seems like as long as the U.S. has military superiority, the spread of revolutions can't happen, like in Venezuela right now. So, I think it was Castro, maybe, who said that he envied communists in the United States because we had the biggest biggest struggle of all, which is to fight communism in the imperial core. I think it was Castro. It could have been Che. But, I think that's true. The United States, we have the biggest burden, right? Because we are the world's police. We are capitalism's police force. But I will say, if the United States went communist tomorrow, I think somewhere in Europe would probably step up as the world's biggest police force as well, to kind of enforce capitalist hegemony around the globe. And I will say, to Trotsky's credit, that's what he's talking about when he talks about forever revolution. He's like, you can't have it until everybody has it because of this. But what we found is that with a strong armed defense, you can. North Korea is able to defend itself. It's a relatively small country. It's able to continue its socialist practice, right? It was Che. Oh, thank you. First time chat, Brett Noir. Thank you. So, you are able to do it with a strongly armed defense. And I think that's something important to note. But I think like the United States, I don't think it's impossible for us to have socialism here at all. I think that, in fact, the Democratic Party is driving us to realize the contradictions of capitalism everyday average people in a much more accelerated pace than in other countries. Like, because they wouldn't even do the shit that Europe did. Europe was so afraid of communism that they gave people higher wages. They allowed unions to flourish. They did these things to kind of keep capitalism hobbling along. The United States didn't do any of that shit. So for us, capitalism is collapsing much faster and in realer time than a lot of other countries, which means that probably socialism is more imminent in our future than other places. Yeah, 93% of people in China own their own homes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Ownership of nukes is important. I'm not going to lie to you. That is true. USS Walmart. Isn't North Korea bad? No. North Korea is defending themselves against us, and we have brutalized those poor people. And then we spread a bunch of weird, zany, kooky lies to make Americans hate them. It's horrible what we do to them. How soon do I think? I think it depends. I think there's stages, right? And I think the stage we're in right now is spreading socialist consciousness. So I think that, spreading socialist consciousness is the most important step. We're in the educational stage, and how successful we are at this will determine how long we're stuck with this fucked up system that we have. So that I think is important to remember. Like, the more people you make not hate communism, the faster we're gonna get through this bullshit. Right now, I'm like, okay, they're not afraid of the word socialism. I'm going to do socialism. I'm using the word socialism. Labor organizing is great. Tenant organizing is great. And I know electoral politics is bullshit, but they do, for some reason, fucking listen to elections. That makes them listen. That makes them care. So do your electoralism in the same way Lenin advocated, which is that it's to meet the masses and to showcase the limitations of the capitalist system. Devil Kid, we're talking. What are we talking about, chat? We're talking about the socialist revolution and its eminence in the United States. Yeah, that is why PSL runs presidential candidates. People are paying attention. It's true. Yeah, they would. I mean, whatever we can make happen in the United States, it would carry great weight for the rest of the world. Totally. So the videos of people getting shot leaving North Korea, it's really interesting. There's one video that you've seen of people getting shot leaving North Korea. It's a person, and it's a man named Oh Chung-song, and I'm going to pull this up for you guys. Oh, you can see I've clicked on this before. So that video you've seen circulated everywhere, that's not a normal situation. That is a North Korean defector who killed someone before he escaped. And that report, in case you think that's North Korean propaganda, no, that comes from South Korea. So the confession came from Oh Chung-song, who he said, I committed a crime in North Korea which caused a death. So he had literally been involved in like a shootout. He had been in the military as well. He had been involved in like a shootout, like with the military, and fled for the border. And that's why he was getting shot at. So this is not a normal situation. This is a very specific thing. So, yeah, he was a criminal, exactly. If you guys have other questions about North Korea, we can do this and I can show you sources all day long. It's easier to do it here than it is on TikTok. On TikTok, my green screen feature on my phone is really, really glitchy and it doesn't work super great. And obviously I block the screen a lot. So if you guys have North Korea questions and you want the sources here, I can pull them up for you. Or if you just have questions in general. But I feel like most of the people here already know the whole North Korea spiel. But anybody new? You have a question about Israel? Okay, what's your question about Israel? Let's see if I know. How would you change the culture so America isn't violent with weapons? I mean, yeah, we talk about that. We say that like school shootings, mass shootings, that's a culture issue. So China actually dealt with something like this with the ETIM, with the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. And that was a separatist group of roughly 200 people who were very, very, very violent. And what they basically wanted to do, and we'll look up the three generations rule in a sec. I think that's a good one too. So what was basically happening is the ETIM wanted to form a new country that spread across 7 different countries that was an ethnostate and a theocracy, basically, theocratic ethnostate. And part of it was in the Xinjiang province of China. So they basically started engaging in mass terrorism, is the best word to explain it, in this pursuit. They would engage in massive public stabbings. They would engage in bombings. They would bomb trains and bus lines. And they would kill anybody who didn't agree with them, even people who were part of their same ethnic minority. Okay? So they were Uyghurs. And they would kill other Uyghurs who were like, hey, we don't think what you're doing is good. They were a terrorist group. And China had what they called their 9/11, basically, when ETIM had a particularly violent terrorist attack there that killed many, many people. Now, the United States had also been trying to stop ETIM because they bombed an American embassy. Do you have videos on your channel about North Korea? I have a lot of videos on my TikTok, but we can talk about North Korea right now, too. So I'm going to finish talking about how to make America less violent, and then we'll get into some North Korea questions. So basically, yeah, the United States tried bombing them. The other 6 countries were doing these raids and trying to kill them and bomb them and shoot them. China even tried doing that for a while, and they were like, it doesn't work. It's not working. So finally, China was like, we need a radically different approach if we want to stop these people. And what they did was basically a transformative justice approach. They went into the communities where these radicalized people were from, and they met with their friends and family, and they were like, why do you think that your loved one basically got radicalized in this way? And I'll switch up to this. So they would tell them, and a lot of the times these people were like basically like 4chan incels, right? They fell down their version of the alt-right pipeline. They were people who didn't have a lot of job opportunities. They weren't making money. They were living at home with their families. They didn't have partners. They didn't have girlfriends, right? They were very lonely, and they didn't have a lot of economic opportunity. So China was like, all right, so we need to strengthen your ties to your family and your community, and we need to get you good jobs. So China went into the region where people were getting radicalized in this way, and they built a bunch of schools for adults, adult vocational centers. And what they said was this: you can choose to go to the school if you want for free. If you are worried about your loved one, your family member getting radicalized down this like terrorist alt-right 4chan incel bullshit pipeline, you can tell us and we will come talk to them and invite them to come to the school. They don't have to, but we can invite them. Or if you commit a crime, because in China, you're not allowed to have outward displays of religion. That's illegal. You can practice, but it has to be privately. If they violate a crime pertaining to religion that communicates, or to separatism or extremism in that way, that communicates they might have fallen down this pipeline, instead of sending them to a traditional prison for their crime, we'll offer them this alternative, kind of like a rehab center. Like if you've ever been in the US in drug court, it's like the difference between regular court and drug court. Like you could go to prison for your drug crimes, or sometimes they'll let you go to like a drug rehabilitation center instead. So it was kind of like that option. So you could be sentenced there for crimes, or you could choose to go there. And these schools were basically set up like boarding schools. You'd stay all throughout the week, but on the weekends, you'd go home and see your families. It was really important that you went home and stayed with your families. They also encouraged your families to come visit you multiple times a week in the centers because they wanted to build up your connections, not isolate you. And they taught you job training skills to go out and get a job in the world. And they also taught you about how religious extremists online would prey on you and try to manipulate you to do shit for their cause. This program was so effective that they like basically never had another terrorist attack after they introduced it. It was so effective, in fact, that the other 6 countries that were dealing with this issue were like, we need to learn from what China did. Now, the United States, that's what they tried to claim was they're running concentration camps. They're not fucking concentration camps. They're adult vocational centers. And there's a reason why when you look at the UN, the United States tried to call some big complaint against China for this and claim that it was like a human rights abuse or something. The people who side with the United States on this, they are all white countries that are allies of the United States, and then like plus Japan or something, because of course. But when you look at the people who side with China, they are all predominantly Muslim countries. Like a bunch of predominantly Muslim countries, especially the ones that dealt with ETIM, are like, no, what China did is correct. It is not like a human rights abuse, and it is actually helping, and we need to do more of it. So I always tell people, if you're confused about the Uyghur situation in China, take a look at the map of who supports China on this and who supports the United States on this. I'll show you the map, actually. I think Politico hosted it, actually. Map, UN resolution supporting China, Uyghurs. I bet we can find it. Okay, yeah. So here's from Axios. So blue, different shades of blue are the ones who criticized China, and yellows who defended them. Do you notice? I always tell people, oh wait, I didn't pull it up, sorry. There you go. Do you notice anything? The places that are like, how dare China, the United States, Canada, white European countries, Australia, and then of course Japan, because Japan's always on some fuck ass weird fascist shit. The countries that defended the UN or that defended China, look, it's many predominantly Muslim countries, right? And it's a number of the countries for whom ETIM wanted to form a country going across them, right? So this, I think, is, if people are confused, this is a good thing to look at. So I think that model is something we could employ in the United States, basically, to fight extremism. If you feel that someone in your family is going down this path, you can report them to a social worker. The social worker can come and be like, hey, people who care about you are worried about you, man. What's going on? And they'd be like, you should get a good job. Like, you seem smart. You seem talented. Like, let's put you in a field that actually would benefit from you being there. Like, let's get you a job. Like, let's do all these things. And I think that would be it. So, yeah. All right, so let's do some North Korea stuff. What are the North Korea questions? Hit me with them. And we'll show some video evidence here. Yeah, we need something like that. Like, hey, your family's worried about you. Yeah. Yeah, but our social workers are even struggling. They can't keep up. They don't have proper resources to help people. I mean, the thing about China, the reason they could do this is that they were able to be like, we have a concrete free educational program we can get you in. We can get you a job. We can get you an education. Those things aren't considered human rights here, though. In China, they are. So they can offer that. Does North Korea have birds? I think they do. Oh, there's an Israel question before. Yeah, you're right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Skywalker. What's the Israel question? If Israel is our pawn, why do they have so much power over us? They say jump and we say how high. Okay. Wait, so first I'm going to read this first time chat and then I'm going to answer that question. You've interviewed and studied some of the loudest, most respected East Asian historians in the Netherlands, the types of scholars to form broad public opinions in prominent talk shows and newspapers. It's crazy how much they antagonize countries like North Korea and China and how much they encourage and justify military actions in the Strait of Taiwan. Yes. How would you argue against their blind Eurocentric antagonism? I mean, it's the same issue we deal with in the United States, and they're just very, very, very propagandized. And so the way we argue is we try to ask them specific questions and we try to fight it with specific truths. You know what I mean? So like the Uyghur thing, for example, that's a hard one to push back against. But the thing I always try to do is show them the sources. And some of the sources, I know what you're talking about because I've seen some of the sources claiming that China is torturing Uyghur people or whatever based in the Netherlands, and they are government funded. So I think it is just a slow effort to be like, show me your source on that. Let's talk about your source on that. Where are they getting these claims from? Let's talk about that. And it's a slow process, but I think it actually is important, especially people who consider themselves intellectual. So, okay, Israel, this is a really simple one, actually. So the reason why Israel seemingly has power over us is because we rely on their location basically as a strategic military outpost. So we need their location as a strategic military outpost, and also their location facilitates the flow of oil through one specific channel for us. So yeah, basically we need them. They need us, but we need them a little more than they need us, if that makes sense. They like our money, certainly. But we rely on them more as a strategic military standpoint, if that makes sense. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship, but we feel like we're getting a lot out of that deal. And then, of course, you have the domestic issue that's not related to foreign policy, which is where Israel lobbyists pay a lot of our Congress people, even our local politicians, right? In California, they pay some of our local politicians money to support them. So then those individual politicians, their campaigns are contingent upon Israel funding. And that's a little bit different. So you have the federal government's interests in materially protecting and supporting Israel. Then you have individual politicians' interests in defending Israel, and those are two different things. Okay, so why does North Korea seem like a monarchy with a royal family? So this is a really interesting question to ask. So basically, there are three people from the same family who have had high-ranking roles in North Korea. There's Kim Il-sung, there's Kim Jong-il, and there's Kim Jong-un. So Kim Il-sung was elected the first premier of North Korea. And he served as premier for many years, and then he switched into a different government position, which was in charge of basically security and defense. So like the Secretary of State. And the way that leadership works in North Korea, it's considered a triumvirate. So you have their executive branch, which the head of which is the premier. So like in the United States, the head of our executive branch is the president. The head of their executive branch is the premier. Then you have their assembly, like their equivalent of parliament or their equivalent of our Congress, right? Now, for us, we consider our third branch of government our judicial branch, right? We consider that like the Supreme Court, which is a load of bullshit, whatever. There they don't really have that because their constitution is considered a living thing. Like every new election cycle for their parliament, their assembly, they are able to modify their constitution. So that's kind of part of the assembly's job as well. But the third part of their triumvirate government leadership is considered the head of the State Department. And that's because national defense is such an important part of their country, right? Because they're still at war with the United States, the world's largest superpower. And we have made no secret about the fact that we want to wipe them off the face of the planet. So when Kim Il-sung, retired from his role as premier, he moved instead into a different role in national defense, which was still a leadership role, but it was not the head of the executive branch, as we think of it. And his son, Kim Jong-il, eventually took over that job, and today Kim Jong-un has that job as well. Now, these three men have also been the heads of the Workers' Party, which is the largest party in North Korea. They are not the heads of the executive branch, though. And they have not been the only people in charge of national defense. In fact, there was a different man for many years who was considered the head of state, even by outsiders. And the head of state, state is different than government. Like the State Department in the United States is about like securing your borders, like what it means to have a statehood, rather than just a government existing, right? So I would say in North Korea, the head of their executive branch is the premier. The head of their government is the assembly, and they will tell you that in their constitution. They'll say the highest organ of state power is the assembly, and their head of state is Kim Jong-un currently, the head of the State Department, right? That kind of thing. So that's different. So there was a different head of state for many years named Kim Yong-nam. For many years, he was the head of the state. And he passed away recently, I believe in 2019. I could be incorrect about that, but it was semi-recently that he passed away. So there have been different people in all of these roles. The current premier is Park Dae-sung. Before that, it was Kim Tak-hun. And those were the people who had the first job that Kim Il-sung was elected to when he was first the leader of North Korea. So these are a triumvirate government structure, three different types of leadership working together. Now, the assembly has the most power. They have the power to elect and recall the other two positions. And the assembly has, I believe, 600-ish people currently in it and is made up of three different political parties. The Workers' Party in North Korea is the largest party. And it's written into the constitution that they should have the most say. And the reason is because they're socialists, like we said when we looked at the principles of communism, right? We want the Constitution to say that the workers will have the power. Now, for Americans, that's confusing because we don't understand the way political parties work under communism. We think of political parties as oppositional, like they're fighting each other for power. And under communism, that's not how it works. So under communism, you don't have to just be in one political party. You can be as many political parties as you want. So the example I always give is that if you are a woman and you have a job and you are a college student, you might be in three parties. You might be in a women's party, a workers' party, and a students' party. You would be in all three of those. So the Workers' Party is the largest in North Korea, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the most powerful. It's the largest because most people in North Korea have a job. So if they're going to be in a political party, one of the political parties they're going to be in is probably the Workers' Party because they probably have a job. So it's not necessarily like they're fighting for power. So many of the people elected into parliament for other political parties are probably also members of the Workers' Party. And many of the people elected into parliament on behalf of the Workers' Party are also probably members of different parties as well. So you can see their interests aren't combative. Their interests are collaborative. And I think that's like a really interesting thing. So why does the United States try to make it look like it's an inherited monarchy? It's simple. It's because the United States has always thrived off of the Western world not understanding how government structures work in Marxist-Leninist places. We intentionally misrepresent it. We intentionally skew things. We like using the word dictator in a way to make people think certain things about communism that aren't true. Marx used the term dictatorship of the proletariat. And what he basically meant, because he's a sassy bitch, when he said that is, you might think you have democracy under capitalism. You get to go, you get to vote for one of your two little people. Sorry, I'll turn off this. But at the end of the day, you're two people. You get to choose rich guy A or rich guy B, and both of them are being paid by rich guy C. You don't get a choice. That's a dictatorship. You're under a dictatorship of rich guys. That's a dictatorship of rich guy. And he basically said, what if instead of having a dictatorship of rich guy, we had a dictatorship of us where we don't let the rich guys have any say at all? And he called that the dictatorship of the proletariat. And that's him being funny with his words, right? And North Koreans will tell you, yeah, we have a dictatorship of the proletariat. Like, what? But that doesn't mean an actual dictatorship as the West thinks of it. Like, our language is very politicized. It just basically means all of the workers have the power and they don't let rich guy C start paying off politicians to tell them what to do on his behalf. So that's kind of where that comes from. So people think that because we have to fulfill this idea of a dictatorship in communist places, so we have to find a guy to call a dictator there. And the Kim family has been very, very active and involved in their politics going back generations. They're very politically taken seriously. Kim Il-sung was a war hero. He's like their country's George Washington. He was the first leader of the country. And his family has always been very active and involved in politics, which is no different here in the United States. We see many families actively involved in politics like this as well. The Bush family, the Clinton family, the Kennedy family. But to fulfill our idea of needing to make a communist place have a big scary dictator, they just fit the bill. So we just put it on them. Most Americans don't even know that Kim Il-sung had multiple different jobs in government in his life, or that the job he first had that he was first elected to as the leader is not a job that his son or grandson have ever held. They're totally different jobs held by different people. So that's kind of where that myth comes from, and that the Workers' Party is not like one big party crushing everybody. It's like more everybody can be in that party as long as you have a job. That's why it's the biggest, because most people have a job. So that's it. All right. Did I miss any other questions? Trump says nose ring. Boring troll. Not a good troll. So sad. One day we'll get a good one. So yeah, any other questions? Any questions about that? Follow-up questions? Any other questions? Oh, the 3 generations. Oh, do you mean the 3-generation imprisonment in North Korea? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, there is a person on TikTok who used the Constitution to claim it was a dictatorship, and then he falsely claimed that the position of the President of State Affairs Commission, which is the head of defense there, that kind of role, was able to elect and fire people in the parliament, which is not accurate. That is not true. They have the power to elect him, actually. It's the opposite. It's the opposite of the truth. I know, I also miss the days when trolling was an art. We've been so desperate for a good troll chat. We've been so denied a good troll for so long. Oh, 3 generations in prison. Yeah. Let's see where you're getting that from. Because I do know there is a rule where you can bring your family with you if you're incarcerated and you get to all live in a house together so you're not isolated from your family. Similar to the thing we talked about China, because they believe that the family unit is really important. I've never seen any credible source saying that 3 people are actually imprisoned. 3 generations are actually imprisoned, but you'll see it, like the AI summaries. Oh my God. George W. Bush Presidential Center. Kin punishment. Camp 14 is where most of these claims come from. Camp 14 was written by Shin Hong Duck, who later had to recant his story. He was found to be lying by his own book author. The author of his book actually was like, this is not true. And other North Korean defectors said it wasn't true, and he had to admit that he lied. Yeah, they're punished 3 generations. So that's called kin punishment. This is where this is all coming from. I have never seen credible claims of this. So Hidden Gulag is also a work of like fiction, basically. So that can't be trusted. Yeah, so I think that this is probably just a misinterpretation of the rule where it's like if you get convicted of a crime and have to go to prison, you're allowed to bring your family with you. And also like your family can bring in food, outside food, like rice, and you like live in a home on the prison grounds altogether. Like think of it like a conjugal visa we have in the United States, but like extended. Like your family can just stay with you if they want. And they don't have to, but they can. And the reason is that they believe your family is very important. So I don't think that is real, but if you have a source on it, we can talk about the actual source of it and see where the original claim comes from. because I've never seen an actual real claim of that. I've just seen like Freedom House, you know, like that's bullshit. That's like not real. It's like all propaganda. But yeah, if you have your actual source, we can talk about it, and we can take a look at it together. I was just searching for it. I just realized I was not on screen share while I was searching. I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting. So here, we'll look and I'll show you guys. Kin punishment TPRK. And everything is like, see, George W. Bush Presidential Center. Like the Smithsonian thing's probably going to be bullshit. U.S. Department of State, Human Rights Watch, which they cite U.S. propaganda. BBC, they're big North Korea haters. They got all sorts of propaganda. Cornell Center on this doesn't have kin. Oh, North Korea. That's just the death penalty, though, so that's not it. Liberty in North Korea, that's a U.S. government paid thing. That's not real. Collective punishment, no. See, I'm not seeing anything like real about this. Death penalty, not kin punishment. Yeah, I'm just not. We'll see what the Smithsonian says. Okay, so they're saying this. Oh, but they don't have any source on it at all. They're just saying it's true. Okay, that's not really useful for us. Cornell Law School. Amendments to its penal code. Okay. They have 22 death-eligible crimes. When is this from? 2013. Okay, so this is outdated. Remember, they update their laws every 5 years. This actually was proven not to be real. So this Cornell Law School thing has no sources, of course, and they're reporting things that are not real. So yeah, I don't know. So if you guys have sources you want to show me that you found, I'll take a look at them. And we can talk about them. Oh, okay. Bye, Simmer Jaime or Simmer Jamie, depending. Yeah. Okay, did we miss any other good questions in here? Since I'm doing a little extended, I'm cutting into my volunteer time today to do this instead because I can do more volunteer time this weekend. Oh, this is a good question. How North Korean documents are translated when the accent is different from the North. So lots of people do understand the North Korean dialect. Like, people go to Kim Il-sung University. There's foreign exchange students there from Russia, from China, from all over the world, from Europe even. They go to Kim Il-sung University. So people outside of North Korea speak the North Korean dialect of Korean. And, you know, people in North Korea speak other languages as well. A lot of them speak English, actually. So they're able to translate it. But, yeah, one of the interesting things is, like, we have to think about how even, like, the term supreme leader, which lots of Americans think that's a job title. That's not a job title. That's a cultural honorary that the media started calling these people. And Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, the media didn't refer to them with that term until after they had passed away as a sign of respect. Kim Jong-un, they started calling him that when he was around 37 years old. So that's a media cultural honorary. That's not like a job title. And when they say our supreme leader is the head of the State Affairs Commission in the Constitution, that's because they're literally talking about Kim Jong-un, because they change it every 5 years based on who's in power, and that's just what the culture started referring to him as, because they liked his political work and they respected him. So yeah, that's like saying founding father in the United States, like supreme leader. But it's worth noting, we're choosing to interpret it with the term supreme. Like, that's a choice in our interpretation. Other people have interpreted it to mean like great leader, like dear leader, like that is based on our interpretation. So the way we're interpreting Korean to English also affects how we're talking about these things. Sometimes we use more bizarre or extreme words, even though they have totally reasonable synonyms, because it fits our narrative and makes it seem scarier or weirder. So, you know, if you are like, oh my God, yeah, they call this person a great leader in North Korea, that doesn't sound scary. But if you're like, they call this person a supreme leader, that sounds crazy. That sounds insane, right? That sounds like a cult. And I think they're doing that on purpose. So that's important to note. Yeah, I love Diana, North Korea, on TikTok. She was a Russian foreign exchange student who lived in North Korea and went to Kim Il-sung University. And I repost her videos a lot. She's very cool and normal. She's a normal person. And that's the thing. It's like, nobody can be fucking normal about North Korea. This woman's normal about North Korea. how different is it? I'm not sure exactly because I don't speak any Korean, but she talks about it because she lived in South Korea and lived in North Korea and studied in both. So she's very familiar with both dialects of language. So you could probably ask her and she'll probably answer. She doesn't have a ton of followers either. She gets a lot of trolls. So if you ask a real question like that, she'd probably love to answer it. Regime versus administration. That's another example of language. Yep. Yeah. That's a big one. Dictator versus leader. Like, why do we call people dictators? Totally arbitrary. It's always the communists or the people who oppose the United States politically. They get called dictators, right? You would never hear Zelensky called a dictator, even though he suspended elections, outlawed opposition parties, and has unilateral say and control over the media. He took full control and centralized the media in Ukraine as well. Her TikTok handle is Diana in North Korea. Let's see if I can find it. I do Megan Adams volunteer work, so she's popping up. I help with her campaign. I think it's this. I'll show you guys. Here. Diana, North Korea. This is her. See, she only has 9,000 followers. She lived in North Korea and studied in both North Korea and South Korea. And she's pretty cool. Ukraine? Yeah, we can talk about Ukraine. The Ukrainian nationalists hate me, though. On Twitter, they threatened to murder Fork. Like, literally. Like, sending me pictures of Fork and telling me they're going to murder. Like, the Ukrainian nationalists are insane. They're as bad as Israelis. I've been told I was going to get sexually assaulted to death by them. I've been told they were going to murder my dog. Like, they are psychos. But we can talk about it for sure. Just so you know, we might have some. David or his thesis exists anywhere? I think this is a 2020, according to the AI summary. David is AI. Oh, good. VeggieRescue.com. Pizza for pizza. Well, that didn't help. I think he did graduate in 2020. So I think that is him. Masters 2017. This is him. This is totally him. Where's this from? That's not him. Oh, that's from Brandis. I think it's this one. Let's see if he's on here. No, he's not on this one. I don't know. Let's see. Cultural studies. I don't even know how to find it. Yeah, we got screen share. Faculty. That's faculty. That's wrong. I'm not sure. I'll make him tell us. He can tell us. We'll force him. Okay? Because I don't know. Oh, rate of 246 people. Wow. Jeez. Wow. A lot of people. Haha. Okay. Okay, the whole dictatorship, of course, is like, objectively, isn't the UAE a real dictatorship? Yes! Yes, it is, but we would never say that. We would never call it that. It's wild. 273. Wow. Wow. So many people. Welcome. Yeah, so you tried for so long on the Claremont website and ProQuest and Google Scholar. I'm really furious if the AI is right. We're going to find it. Well, I'll ask him. To share it. Maybe we'll share it. First time chat from Raider. Chat count jumped. Yeah. Okay, so what other questions you got? We're talking about North Korea, for everybody new. We're talking about North Korea. We're talking about weird things you've heard. Yeah. So this person, first time chat, what are some typical local political positions do you think benefit the most from communist and socialist people holding the positions? Anything that gets a lot of attention is what I think. It's because we're talking about David. Anything that gets a lot of attention, I think, because you want people to have a big podium. So, first time chat from Raider. Bloop wanted to learn about Ukraine. We can talk about Ukraine. Yeah, so I think anywhere where you get a lot of media attention is going to be good. Kenneth Mejia here in Los Angeles was able to make the city controller position get a lot of attention, and that was really cool. So that was really good. And that's what we're doing with Megan Adams, whose campaign I'm volunteering on. She's a Marxist-Leninist who is running for state controller of California, and we're trying to get attention on the budget. So that's kind of what we're working on too. Yeah, longer Twitch stream. We're doing it. We're not doing volunteer work right now. We're doing this instead. So yeah, do you guys want to talk about Ukraine? Is that interesting? I mean, I just did so many podcast episodes about it. If you listen to the podcast episodes, it might be a little boring because it's just repeat. I did 8 hours of podcast content about it. But I will say the death threats I've gotten from Ukrainian nationalists on Twitter are insane. It's like the Israelis. It's like indistinguishable. Okay. So you've only heard good things about Ukraine from liberals. My podcast is called Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. The concept was like that it was a true crime podcast, but for politics and real life and social issues. So it's not actually true crime. It's about the crimes of the imperial ruling class. Why am I getting death threats from them? Because I said that the Ukrainian government had been slowly stolen by the United States since 2010, maybe as early as 2004, and that the current government is an extremely right-wing fascist government that is very inhospitable to leftists and is backed by the USA, and that the current war going on with Ukraine is the United States' fault more than it is Russia's fault. And they don't like that. They're like, so you're obsessed with Putin and you hate Ukrainians and want us to die. And I'm like, no, and no. I am just telling you the facts of my country's intervention in your country and letting you know this is all our fault. They don't like that, though. Yeah. Yes. It's this person, Skywalker, exactly right. So we can talk about it, but you need to know it's really controversial and people get really fucking mad when you talk about this. And they will threaten to kill you. It's wild. So basically, yeah, here's what you need to know. So Ukraine was part of the USSR, and during World War II, Ukraine experienced the worst of the Holocaust, like the worst of the Holocaust. It's estimated that the country that had the most deaths in the Holocaust was Ukraine. And one of the reasons why historians think that Ukraine struggled the most during the Holocaust with so many deaths is because a specific subset of evil people in Ukraine literally wrote to the Nazis and were like, we love your work. Will you come do it in Ukraine? We'll help you. And this was a group of Ukrainian nationalists who wanted to build a Ukrainian ethno-state called the OUN. Now, the OUN had a split at some point, and one part of the split was more militant and more interested in building like an ethno-state kind of Nazi style. And the leader of this was called Bandera. So that's sometimes called the OUNB. The OUNB under Bandera. And Bandera was an extreme right-wing, like nationalist, fascist bad guy. He wanted Ukraine to be separate from Russia, and he wanted to be a Ukrainian an ethno-state of people from Ukraine. So he was a really bad guy. And the OUNB, he murdered people too in Ukraine that did not agree with him. And under him, the OUNB actually welcomed the Nazis into Ukraine and served as like their basic volunteer armies to help execute minorities in Ukraine. So they murdered large numbers of Polish people, Romani people, just anyone basically they could find. So part of the reason historians think the casualties during the Holocaust were so high in Ukraine is because of the OUNB under Stepan Bandera helping the Nazis so much. And this wasn't unique to Ukraine. There were little groups of deranged right-wing psychopaths helping the Nazis in other countries, but it was kind of a lot of people in Ukraine. So they basically helped with the Holocaust in Ukraine. And then Stepan Bandera was like, thanks for helping us do ethnic cleansing, Hitler. Now you're going to turn Ukraine over for me for complete control, right? And Hitler was like, no, what? Ukraine's ours now. Fuck off. And so Stepan Bandera did get locked up by the Nazis, but like in really cush conditions. Like he was held at a concentration camp, but he got his own apartment like all the officers did, and he ate all of his food and everything in the officers' quarters. So it was like this weird, like, our friend acted up a little bit at the club last night kind of imprisonment, not like an actual imprisonment. And then he was released and he went back to Ukraine, whatever. So basically the USSR army defeated the Nazis during the Holocaust. And the USSR, when they came and they kicked out the Nazis from Kiev, a lot of people in Ukraine built statues honoring some of the army soldiers from the USSR's army that had helped liberate them from Nazi Germany occupation. So all around Ukraine, you would see statues to USSR soldiers, some who died in defending Ukraine from the Nazis, and all these people who helped to liberate them from the Holocaust. And Ukraine had a really, really favorable view of the USSR. Most Americans don't know that. Many Ukrainians don't know that. That prior to 2010, Ukraine really liked the USSR and even Russia after the USSR ended. So in 1991, and another reason they really liked the USSR actually has to do with the Holodomor. Most people today think that Russia caused the Holodomor, the USSR caused the Holodomor. No, in fact, all records show the Holodomor was part of a naturally recurring famine in the region, and the USSR actually found a way to stop the famine from ever happening again, which is why so many people in Ukraine actually really had favorable views of the USSR, that and liberating them from the Holocaust. So by the time and people hate this, they're like, no, this isn't true, no! But I'm sorry, it is true. This is true. So they basically then, like from there, in 1991, when we looked at the polling of people who wanted to dissolve the USSR had a famous referendum where they were like, who wants to dissolve the USSR? Because the USSR's leadership had become corrupted and they were looking to dissolve the USSR. Ukraine had some of the highest votes of no, I don't want to dissolve the USSR. The average for every country in the USSR was 70% wanted to keep it. Ukraine, it was like 80% wanted to keep it. And when the USSR started, their corrupt leadership started dismantling anyway, it was Ukrainians who tried to assassinate them to keep the USSR. And it failed. And that's when Ukraine was like, fuck this, then we're doing our own thing. Like, the USSR has been corrupted. We can't be a part of it anymore. Yes. Ukrainian families survived World War II in a Nazi camp. It was very, very horrible what happened to them. They were the worst victims of the Holocaust. It was horrible. It's not a competition, but Ukraine got it really, really, really bad. So, basically that was the story. Now, meanwhile, what the United States did during World War II is they looked at these people like Bandera and the OUN who had helped the Nazis, and they were like, you could be useful to us. So in all of these different countries, these little fringe groups that helped the Nazis, what the USA did is we found some of their top leadership and we imported them to the United States, and we had them form these councils basically here in the United States. And the Ukraine one was called, I believe, the UCCA, the Ukraine, I'm going to look it up. We'll do a screen share while I look this stuff up to show you guys. UCCA, Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Here we go. This is it. So we formed a bunch of these basically with all of these different countries, but we staffed them with people who had been either outright Nazis or Nazi sympathizers. And during the 1980s, Ronald Reagan went to all these different little Congress committees that he created, and he was like, look, I will give you more political power in our government if you help me get elected. And all of these groups, they were very right-wing, remember? They had been literal fascists, literal Nazis. They worked and they helped Reagan get elected. And then Reagan basically formalized their roles as part of the U.S. government. So it's a nonpartisan, nonprofit national umbrella organization, right? But they're affiliated with the U.S. government now officially because Reagan gave them more power as part of this deal. And the UCCA in particular had OUNB members in it. We brought over OUNB members who had helped in the Holocaust. So that's their family. So very, very interesting. Now, this is what we started doing. And this was after World War II. And by the 80s, we were taking these people who had been part of the far right extremists, like basically Nazis and Nazi collaborators in Ukraine, and giving them a lot of political power here and getting them involved in our government. So in 2004, there was an election in Ukraine. And in the year 2000, cutting to 1991, the USSR dismantled. Sorry, jumping around a little bit. And when the USSR was dismantled, they had their new government come into place, whatever. The new government, though, still worked with Russia a lot. And even if you look at polling up to 2009 about what people in Ukraine thought about Russia, you'll see that they actually had pretty favorable views of Russia. Let's see if we can find this Pew 2009 Ukraine-Russia poll. See, I've looked it up before. You can see I look at this stuff all the time. All right. So, views of the U.S. and Russia, Ukraine, 84% of Ukrainians were viewing Russia favorably in 2009. You can see this right here, right? I'll make it bigger. Right here. Boom. Right? So they were still having a favorable relationship with Russia even after the end of the USSR. And Ukraine in 2009, 41% had an unfavorable view of NATO. Right? They weren't really interested in joining NATO. They didn't really want to join. They weren't that into NATO. Percent good. Ukraine, more people viewed the influence of Russia in Ukraine at this time as good than the influence of the EU or the influence of USA. And 2009 is an important year, and that's why we're showing you this. So we'll talk about that in a second. So, in the year 2000, they had a president who was still pretty closely aligned with Russia, was doing trade deals with Russia, was having this favorable relationship with Russia. And then scandal hit him. It turned out he had a journalist killed. So the country was up in arms, and the journalist had worked for this online newspaper, which was new at the time in the year 2000. And it started to make Ukrainians view online newspapers as being very, very valid sources, like speaking truth to power. And the United States was like, we can use this moment to get more control in Ukraine, because we had kind of been interested in getting control in Ukraine, but viewed it as impossible up to this point because of their proximity to and their affinity for Russia. But Ukraine was considered the breadbasket of Europe. They had immense agricultural sector opportunities, as well as some rare earth mining. I think like uranium, some rare earth mining going on that we wanted access to. So we were like, we can use this as an end. So in 2004, we actually tried to run a political candidate in Ukraine that was really closely aligned with the United States. And from here, this basically started this battle going forward for control over Ukraine from pro-Western backed forces and the standard run-of-the-mill Ukrainian forces that had had favorable relationships with Russia. Now, the reason why we say 2010 is when this all changed, and the reason why we look at polling data in 2009 is because in 2010, the United States then aggressively started dumping millions and millions of dollars every single year via the National Endowment for Democracy into propaganda and election control in Ukraine. Let's see if we can find these records. National Endowment for Democracy started scrubbing the internet of their endowment records. Ukraine 2010 to 2014 or whatever. We might not be able to find a lot of it. Document description maybe here. So they'll say here that they gave a lot of money. This is the Chinese government saying they put $14 million in one project. Proposed appropriation language. This is from, let's see if they have anything about Ukraine in here. Okay, for fall 2014, funding was going to focus in upcoming elections in priority countries including Ukraine, Belarus, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. I don't know how to pronounce that one. But these are all obviously to fuck with Russia, right? Everybody. And Ukraine, NED, National Endowment for Democracy, for anybody who doesn't know, that's the CIA's NGO. Okay, the CIA started this NGO. And for anybody else who doesn't know, Alan Weinstein, CIA, National Endowment for Democracy, quote, Washington Post. There we go. So this is a Washington Post article. Oh, I understand. Help me. Oh my God, paywall. Okay, well, here you go. Summary. A lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA. This is Weinstein, who was one of the founders of the thing. Okay, sorry, I don't have all the paywall stuff. So basically, this National Endowment for Democracy, doing what the CIA used to do, they then, were assisting a broad range of NGOs, political parties, trade unions, business associations, etc. So this is kind of in 2014. They started this process in 2010, and this is all part of National Endowment for Democracy's public reporting. So they started doing something pretty intense, which was buying the media up and buying a lot of those online newspapers starting in 2004 to try to shift public opinion. And 2004 was a color revolution. We backed an orange revolution. We had this political candidate who was running that was in favor of Western interests, and his campaign color was orange. So we helped use a lot of these online media sources we had started and funded and created to convince Ukrainians to go out into the street wearing orange to support basically a pro-Western political candidate who lost an election. And it was like, maybe he lost, maybe he didn't, it was disputed, whatever. So this kind of thing. So then after this, by the time 2013 came around, we had already invested at least 3 years, maybe more like 4 years deep into massive propaganda, trying to tell people in Ukraine that actually Russia was evil and you should try to align more with the United States, with EU, with NATO, all of these things. And this was starting to really work. There was a whole subset of Ukraine that started to get more interested in aligning themselves more with Europe, more with the United States, and more with NATO. And Ukraine is shaped like this, and there's a river that runs through it. Well, the east side of Ukraine continued to feel more aligned with Russia. A lot of them were ethnically Russian. They spoke Russian as their first language. Like, they felt more Russian. And the people who were really interested in looking more westward towards the United States and Europe and NATO, they were on the west side of the river. So the people on the west side of the river started to get more interested in this. And there was a president at the time who was kind of trying to straddle the line between both. He was viewed as a more pro-Russia guy, but he was like, I don't want full-on civil war to break out in my country. So there was this one really important trade deal going on, mostly around oil. And basically, some part of the country wanted them to do the trade deal with the EU to strengthen their ties with that. And some wanted them to do it with Russia to just maintain the status quo. And he didn't know what to do. And in the end, he decided to go with Russia because he didn't want to piss off his neighbor. And this caused a large section of the west side of Ukraine to rise up in protests. Now, the protests were attended by a lot of different types of people. There were anarchists, there were some socialists, there were literal fucking Nazis, like Nazis who worshipped that old guy Stepan Bandera and like were trying to do, the OUN still exists in Ukraine, so they were trying to do more, build a Ukrainian ethno-state, yes, and then just like average people who are more interested in the West. So they rose up in these protests. Now, anarchists in Ukraine at the time will tell you that it quickly became apparent that even though the neo-Nazis were a relatively small portion of the protest, they started running the show. And they started kicking people out, and they started controlling who was allowed to be part of it. So the neo-Nazis really started running these protests in 2013. And they were very, very militant. They were very, very armed, and they had an agenda. And their agenda was basically like, this is a means to an end. Like, we are going to use this opportunity. We hate Russians, right? We want to ethnically cleanse Ukraine of all the ethnic Russians. And this is a temporary alliance with these people who don't share our same politics, but who also want a more pro-Europe, pro-Western outlook. And they are going to be the vehicle through which we can ethnically cleanse Ukraine of Russians. And we're going to get rid of Russians, we're going to get rid of communists, and we're going to get rid of Jews. That was their whole thing. And so they kind of strong-armed their way into taking over these protests in a major way. And anarchists were like, yeah, we had to leave because neo-Nazis were literally calling us communists and threatening to kill us. And they're like, we're not even communists. And it's like, well, yeah. So this is what was going on there. So by the end of 2013, the United States government was getting involved. They were showing up to these protests. They were taking dinners with people who were in charge of the neo-Nazi groups. They were standing on stage next to the leaders of the neo-Nazi groups. They were passing out food. And they were like, we support your protests, basically. We support your protest movement. And a leaked phone call came out where Victoria Nuland from the U.S. government was basically like, look, like the leader of this neo-Nazi group clearly cannot be the next president of Ukraine, right? But this other guy is more clean. Basically, he could be the next president of Ukraine, and he should be talking to the leader of this neo-Nazi group often. They should be in constant communication. And shortly after that, the guy she thought should be the leader, he became the leader. So this is like this whole weird thing where for months leading up to it, the United States was really getting involved in these protests and trying to like push an agenda that they were freedom fighters in Ukraine fighting against Russian oppression. That's not exactly what was going on now. So this was what we call the Euromaidan. the Euromaidan. And as soon as this happened, the United States also took these neo-Nazis and started even flying them to the United States and training them. The CIA started giving them military training, and we started aggressively arming them. And basically a coup happened. And Ukrainians don't like it when you call Euromaidan a coup. It was a coup. Scholars will tell you it was a coup. People will tell you it was a coup. Timoshenko, who was another political candidate aside from all of this at the time, was like, this is a coup. A coup has occurred. Whatever you want to call it, it was definitely regime change. Nobody can argue with that. They overthrew the existing president who had been more aligned with Russia in their eyes, and this new government took place that had been backed heavily and supported heavily by, yes, neo-Nazis. Neo-Nazis that then were aggressively funded, armed, and supported by the United States government. So this weird power imbalance emerged. The new government, they weren't necessarily neo-Nazis, but they were pretty right-wing. But Europe didn't like their affiliation with this neo-Nazi paramilitary group. And Europe was like, hey, we see your new government. Okay, you want to get really involved with us. You maybe want to join NATO, whatever. You can't do this Nazi shit out in the open. And the Nazis were really out in the open Nazis. They were just like, mask off, we're fucking Nazis. And it was pretty scary. And they were running through the streets of Ukraine, attacking anybody they thought was a Russian, a communist, or a Jew. They burnt alive several leftists inside of a trade union building. They killed like 40 some odd leftists because they were communists. They were running through areas of Ukraine that were more ethnically Russian and doing really fucking insane shit to them. Like they were kidnapping people, they were extorting people, they were beheading Russians and sending their heads to their mothers in boxes. Like it was bad. And the EU was like, you got to clean up your Nazi problem. So what Ukraine did is they basically absorbed the Nazi battalions, the fringe Nazi battalions that had been kind of won the protests, the revolution, the regime change operation, the coup, whatever you want to call it, in 2014. They absorbed them formally into their military. And sections of Ukraine that were predominantly ethnically Russian were like, yo, this is bad. So there was one section that was predominantly ethnically Russian, Crimea, and they were like, they had never expressed an interest in wanting to join Russia before. This was not something interesting to them at all. But basically the civil war got so bad and they were so frightened for their lives that they basically begged Russia to be let in for protection. Because they're like, Russia will be able to protect us. We are close to Russia. And these people are running through our streets crying death to Russians, and a lot of us are ethnically Russian. The amount of people in Crimea that wanted to join Russia, it was nearly universal. So, and also Russia had been leasing a port in Crimea from Ukraine. So they had a bunch of Russian military equipment there already. So they were like, this just makes sense for us. You all want to be here. We want the port. Sure, come on in, whatever. So Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. And this led to a bunch of conflict, obviously. And another section of eastern Ukraine that was also had a lot of people who were ethnically Russian started to express interest in doing the same thing. And that's the Donbass region. And Ukraine was like, absolutely not. So the neo-Nazi kind of army picked up steam in their militarized efforts to control the Donbass region, and shit got really bad. So you had people in the Donbass region fighting against these neo-Nazis who were trying to kill them for being ethnically Russian. You had these neo-Nazis there in Donbass fighting for them not to secede from Ukraine. You had the Ukrainian government going, I don't know, they're part of us now, it's official, and then this was all before any war was officially announced. You also had the United States funding and backing the neo-Nazis, being like, those are our guys, we love them. And Israel even had started to get involved giving weapons to the Ukrainian military. But the problem was that in giving weapons to the Ukrainian military, they were giving weapons to these neo-Nazis. So their weapon thing came a little bit later, actually. I jumped the gun on that one, but we'll get there. So Donbass region was like, hey, Russia, can you let us into like you did for Crimea? But this one was a little trickier for a few reasons. Number one, it wasn't near universal that people in this region wanted to join Russia. The United States did polling and estimated it was only 30% of them. Russia did polling and estimated it was 90% of them. We know it probably fell somewhere between 30 and 90%, which is a lot of people, but it wasn't as clear-cut as with Crimea. So that presented a problem from a public perspective. On top of that, another thing that happened is that basically, Russia thought it would be more advantageous to have people in Ukraine who still liked Russia. They're like, look, if we annex you, we've taken all of the regions of Ukraine that kind of were sympathetic to us out of the equation. And now all of Ukraine is just going to be an enemy to us. So strategically, this doesn't make sense. We would rather have you be a part of Ukraine and not fucking hate us than have you be a part of Russia and now all of Ukraine fucking hates us. So they were like, no, we're not going to annex you, but we will back your separatist movement if you want to become independent, because of your location, then you're a buffer between us and the country that hates us, Ukraine. So Donbass then started fighting for their independence. And this is really when the militarized things stepped up, and that's when the fighting from the neo-Nazis in the West got even more extreme, and that's when the heads in the boxes started happening and really bad shit like that started happening. And Russia was like, we will back your fight for independence. So technically Russia wasn't supposed to enter the border of Ukraine, but they were like, we're recognizing the Donbass as independent. So if we're in here, we're not in Ukraine, we're in the Donbass, which is its own place. And this created all these complications. Now, meanwhile, basically, things in Ukraine had gotten wild. Zelensky is elected president. All left-wing political parties get outlawed. You can't be a communist. You can't be a socialist. You can't be an anarchist. Why? Because they associate it with being Russian for some reason. They start seizing control of media. And the United States even remarks, like, oh, they're really good at stratcom, strategic communications. They start controlling the narrative about what's happening in Ukraine. And they start really trying to position it like big evil Russia is taking over, and they want to join NATO really bad. Now, the problem with this is that the United States had basically been dangling a carrot on a stick in front of Ukraine for a while, like join NATO, join NATO. But you remember, look at these polls. People didn't want to join NATO. They did not view NATO. Oh, shit, where's our NATO fucking page? Oh, I think I closed it, but whatever. You remember, they didn't view NATO favorably. They weren't interested in NATO. But now all of a sudden, they were like, well, NATO could protect us from Russia because of all this fighting we have going on with Russia. And then conversations about Ukraine joining NATO started to advance. Now, Russia, to its credit, started sending a lot of negotiation attempts to the West, like, hey, we just really don't want Ukraine to join NATO. If Ukraine joins NATO, you've already got fucking Georgia in NATO now. You've got Finland in NATO. They've all got missiles pointed at us. Ukraine is 500 kilometers from Moscow. They could have a missile pointed at our backyard. Like, could you please stop? And they even were like, what if we joined NATO? What if this? What if that? What if you had a special section of NATO that wasn't militarized and didn't store missiles but could still be part of your defense pact? Like, to Russia's credit, they really aggressively tried to negotiate. And to Ukraine's credit, it wasn't them who said no. It was the United States who said no. We were like, no, Russia doesn't tell us who is and who isn't a part of NATO. And we knew, I think, that this would escalate into war because Russia explicitly was like, if you keep doing this, we're going to have no choice but to go to war. So the United States, I think, didn't care. I think the United States saw war with Russia as favorable for us because we now had all this new influence and control in Ukraine. And just like Russia was like, we want to keep the part of Ukraine that likes us in Ukraine, the United States was like, fuck that. We want to get the part of Ukraine that likes Russia out of Ukraine. Because guess what? Russia already hates us. Who cares? That's already an enemy. Ukraine right now, divided. We put some work in. It's divided. Some of them like us. Some of them hate us. They're kind of ambivalent. If we get the part of them that hates us into Russia, now we have a country that hates us and a country that loves us instead of a country that hates us and a country that's ambivalent. That's a win for us. So I think to the United States, Ukraine losing large sections of territory to Russia was advantageous, which is really fucking sad because we didn't care how many people died in that process very clearly. So this is kind of the situation going on before Russia ever declares war, right, against Ukraine. And finally, Russia has some troops along the border, and Zelensky is like, we're going to go to war with you if we have to. And Russia's just like, that's it. Just go to war now then. We're doing war now. Declares war, and then missile strikes start happening. Now, the war that happens between Ukraine and Russia, war is bad. Shocking to no one, war is fucking bad, right? It's bad on both sides. It's bad for everybody. Do war crimes happen during war? Yes, it is absolutely horrible. And it was happening on both sides. Both sides were launching investigations into each other for all sorts of fucked up atrocities that were occurring. Russia apparently still has an open claim being investigated for genocide against ethnic Russians in Ukraine. This is wild. And so I want to point out at the time that the war starts, most Ukrainians don't support the neo-Nazis there until this specific thing happens in a place called Mariupol, where basically an area that was holding a lot of refugees, a lot of women and children, gets exploded. And Ukraine claims Russia did it. Russia claims that the neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian military did it as a false flag to blame them, to make them look bad. Who fucking knows? Both are honestly plausible. I don't know. But whatever the case, the people start to get really sympathetic to the Nazis that are defending them. And Ukraine at this time starts to get a lot more Nazi. You have people on TV being like, fine, you know what? Maybe I am a fucking Nazi. Kill every single Russian and kill their children so they don't grow up into big Russians. I mean, it gets wild over there. And this really turns the tide of public sentiment in support of these fucking Nazis. Which war does numbers to people's heads. I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, that's kind of the situation going on in Ukraine. And now where they're at is they have this 28-point peace deal they're trying to negotiate, which basically would say that Ukraine can never be in NATO, right? This is what the United States brokered. Well, the deal we're trying to broker, Ukraine can never be in NATO, and they have to put it in their constitution. They never will. Like huge sections of Ukraine, the Donbass and Crimea are just officially Russian now. Ukraine has to do like sensitivity training to teach their people how not to be basically racist against Russians. Like all this wild stuff. And also Russia loses $100 billion that has to be applied to the reconstruction of destroyed areas of Ukraine. But the United States are the ones who get to broker the deal. And it's written into the peace deal that we get 50% of the profit from that. I'll pull up the peace deals. Hold on. 28-point peace program. Ukraine, Russia. And so we just profit off this. Like, let's see if they actually have it listed somewhere. Here we go. Associated Press published it. Yeah, so all of these peace deals, like, Ukraine has to have the size of their army reduced. They agree to enshrine in their constitution they won't join NATO. NATO agrees not to station troops in Ukraine. The U.S. receives compensation, and we also are entitled to 50% of the profits. Here we go. The U.S. will receive 50% of the profits from the venture of $100 billion in frozen Russia and assets being invested in U.S.-led efforts to rebuild and reinvest in Ukraine. So our businesses make money off of this. Now, in this process as well, we've also had a number of U.S.-affiliated politicians go to Ukraine, get Ukrainian citizenship, and get jobs in the new Ukrainian government, and also get jobs in the new Ukrainian businesses. So we are really trying to foster this Ukraine-USA relationship at the expense of who fucking cares, according to us. And it's really, really brutal. So sorry, that's kind of the summary. I know that was really long. Alibaba. Yeah, that's what's going on. So it's when you look at this situation and you're like, Russia did this, to me, that is a fallacy. That is, you're failing to understand how the United States systematically has been trying to steal Ukraine from what they perceive to be the sphere of Russian influence for decades and deliver it to U.S. businessmen. And this war is part of it. Oh, I don't think we ever wanted Ukraine to join NATO. I think we knew they were never gonna, but we wanted to provoke them into war with Russia so we could profit in two different ways. In losing the more tricky parts of Ukraine that liked Russia, just be like, yeah, that's fucking Russia now, get them out of there. And also for us to profit from the reconstruction efforts and really use the reconstruction as an opportunity to get our businesses in there and cemented in there to make a lot of profit. So that is what's going on. And Ukrainian nationalists get really mad at this for a few reasons. They think by saying this, you're justifying Russia's aggression against them. You're not, but really this is a proxy war of the USA versus Russia. So, this is what's going on there. They also get really mad if you call their government right-wing. It is a right-wing fascist government in place in Ukraine right now. And that wasn't the government before the U.S. started meddling there. So the U.S. got Ukraine a right-wing fascist government in place. We did that. We put those people in there. And that's us. And they don't like that. They also don't like it when you call Stepan Bandera a Nazi. They're like, no, he was a great nationalist. He was a fucking Nazi. They even tore down statues. The new right-wing government, they tore down statues honoring the USSR soldiers who had liberated them from the Holocaust, and they replaced them with statues of Bandera the Nazi, who ushered in the Holocaust by writing to Hitler and saying, come and my people will help you. That's what the new right-wing government started doing around 2014 in Ukraine. They renamed whole streets after Stepan Bandera and OUN members. Like, it is a fascist far-right government that outlawed being a leftist, that outlawed being a socialist, that is building statues and monuments to Nazis. And they don't like it when you point that out. But it is true, and it is part of the equation of what's going on here. So yeah, that's what's going on. Okay, so this is a good question. How do you know about the polling and the data? Well, that's why when we talk about the Donbass, we see a range. We're like, the United States, of course, when they did the polling, 30% of people wanted this. Russia, of course, when they did the polling, 90% of people wanted this. So we know it's probably a range in there that falls somewhere in the middle. And polling is found to be very, very biased. So it depends on who's asking and why. The reason I like the Pew Research polling is that it's multiple different polls. You can look through. It's like a 20-page document of probably 60 different polls, and they all deliver pretty similar, consistent results. So that's the kind of stuff I think is good. So you look for similarities and you look for ranges. And that's what's going on kind of with that. 50% is, yeah. And we profit. We profit. Okay, so I missed a lot in the chat. Did we have any Ukrainian nationalists threatening to murder me and Fork? Or no? Did we miss them? Because on Twitter, they hate me. Yeah. Yeah, and you see leftists in the United States supporting this right-wing Ukrainian government, which is really, really sad. Okay, good. It's been chilled. Okay, cool. That's really very sad. Because they think it's like Palestine. You'll see people with the Palestinian flag and the Ukrainian flag side by side, and you're like, these are not the same situations. And it is very sad for a number of people in Ukraine, specifically ethnically Russian people in Ukraine, communist socialists in Ukraine, who have been threatened by this new government who is attacking them viciously. And it's very sad for the people who are left to die as war fodder for American capital interests. But you would be remiss to not point out that the new government is not sympathetic. Yeah, NATO leftists. Yeah, you can't, that's not a left-wing political position to support NATO. And it has pulled a lot of people super right-wing. Yeah. So we'll have like 10 more minutes for a chat and then I have to get into work. I'm working today. We're launching a flash sale. We always do it on Christmas Eve. It's the Get What You Really Wanted sale. So yeah, Ukraine and Israel are buddy-buddy. And Zelensky said, I want Ukraine to be a big Israel. And what he meant by that is he wants Ukraine to serve as a military base and military stronghold for Western interests in that region against Russia. Yeah, it's not great. I will say, I'm not a pro-Russia leftist. I'm a Russia-neutral leftist. But in this situation, everything Russia has done has been reasonable. I mean, war crimes, all war is war crimes. I don't support war of any kind, especially not bourgeois war, right? You know what I mean? I support revolution for the right reason. I don't support just like war. But looking at the position Russia is in, they did so much to try to avoid this, and it does become apparent. And that's what Ukrainian nationalists really don't like to hear. They don't want to hear that. And the sad thing is it's not even their government that blocked it. It's our government that blocked it. So you don't have to love Russia to look at the situation and be like, damn, Russia really tried. Like, they tried. They really tried. A lot. Why did Russia remain enemies of the West even after their transition to capitalism? Because they, you don't have like similarly when we talk about Iran, we're like, well, they're not communists, but they understand the evils of U.S. empire. It's kind of like that, Russia has long stood up against American empire. Like for Venezuela once, I've told this story a lot because I think it's really funny. Russia actually sent 2 aircrafts to Venezuela when the United States was up to some coup shenanigans there many years ago and parked their aircrafts outside of Caracas and were just like, we heard you might be in need of some bilateral negotiations, which is like government way of being like, you're not going to fucking coup Venezuela on our watch. We will kill you. So they do strong work against the U.S. empire, and that's why the United States government hates them. And that's why some people with left-wing politics will often be like, well, Russia did a good thing here, and they did. And that doesn't mean we love their internal government. Their internal government's not Marxist. It's never been Marxist, whatever. But we recognize their role in defending victims of U.S. empire. And the narrative that we've built that Russia is its own empire now, that it's land hungry, that it's a power grab, that is not entirely accurate. And we see that based on them not annexing the Donbass region when they could have. And they're rational, they're practical. They've even long wanted a seat at the table to negotiate with the United States and Europe, and we have declined it to them. So the idea that Russia is any more evil than any other capitalist country or, it's just not true. And I'm not going to personally buy into that. And they do some good things when it comes to standing up against the West. So that's why it seems like a lot of leftists love Russia, but very few leftists actually are obsessed with Russia. It's the same situation with Iran. When you're right, you're right. And we're not going to pretend like you're not right when you're right. And that's kind of it. Oh, cheers, Teddy. Oh my God. Hi. Yeah, I need help. I'm bad at Twitch. I am bad at Twitch. Yeah, that would be awesome. Okay, yay. I'll have to do this after the chat. I'll have to follow you. Did Russia keep any of their socialist characteristics? The second biggest political party in Russia is a communist party. And they did apparently outlaw Trotskyist parties. Which is funny. So maybe that. You know, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, Putin sometimes says, but I mean, it's true. And just the thing I always get into is you're not, like, it's the same way people used to be like, do you condemn Hamas? And people are like, do you condemn Russia? And like, I feel like we're really missing the point here. And no, you're not going to get me to look stupid on the internet because you have the political literacy of a thimble, you know? It's just not, I'm not interested in that. So, you know, and not saying Hamas and Russia are the same, obviously, but it's the same energy from people who are asking you to condemn these political players as though that has political utility, when it doesn't. It communicates like a short-sighted, childlike view of geopolitics. And that I'm offended by, you know? It's just... And people want you to do that. And that's how they control the narrative. And that's why when the United States was like, oh, Ukraine's really good at StratCom, they were right. Just like Israel used to be really good at StratCom, strategic communications, controlling the narrative. That is something they're both really good at. Liberals always say the Russians weren't always there and they came from the USSR. I personally don't believe in borders like ethnic groups, blah, blah, blah. They frame it as the USSR displacing Ukrainians. I mean, that's not what Ukraine thought at the time. So, you know, Kiev and Russia... There's long been a complicated relationship with that, going back hundreds of years, you know, but I will tell you that as far as recent history goes, during the USSR, up to 1991, up to 2009, Ukraine did not have a problem with Russia. And it's not until the United States started spending millions and millions and millions of dollars every single year there to tell them they had a problem with Russia that they decided they had a problem with Russia. And propaganda is effective and it is cheap. And that's the sad part. Yeah. Yeah, Hamas is way more righteous than Russia. That is true. That is very, very true. That is true. Yeah. Yeah. So, first time chat. Hello. It's just, I don't know. They're just, it's very childlike. And it benefits nobody to deny the reality of how, like, the current government of Ukraine is extremely far right and fascist. Putin's claims that he wants to denazify Ukraine, I don't think that's his motive for the war, very obviously. But he's also not wrong. That Ukraine does have a massive Nazi problem. And it's true that only 2% of the population voted for Nazis but in the last election. But that 1 in 50 people in your country being an outright fucking Nazi is actually a lot of people. First of all, imagine 50 people. One of them, every 50 people you encounter, one's a Nazi. You're in a concert full of, 3,000 people? How many Nazis are in the room with you? That's insane to think about. Like, I don't know if 3,000 people can fit in a concert. That's just how many people went to my high school, and I know we could all cram into an auditorium. But you know what I mean? Like, that's an insanely high number of people, actually. But more than that, they have disproportionate sway and influence over the government. And the government there now is very right-wing. 90% of Ukrainian news was funded by USAID. I mean, that makes sense to me. I haven't seen that personally, but that feels correct based on my knowledge. I mean, and National Endowment for Democracy, obviously. That feels right to me. 60 Nazis at the concert. Thank you. That's too many Nazis. That's kind of a lot of fucking Nazis. And more than that, you have people who are like, I'm not a Nazi, but. And there's a lot of that in Ukraine, especially after the Mariupol incident. The guy who got on TV was like, I'm not a Nazi, but you keep calling me a Nazi. Literally put up a picture of Eichmann behind him and was like, I'll allow myself to quote Eichmann then since you think I'm a Nazi, and then praised Eichmann. Like, this shit's wild. And a lot of Western leftists don't know this. Like, this is not a Palestine-Israel situation. And Israel, an Israeli-Ukrainian billionaire, is funding these neo-Nazis in the military in Ukraine. Yes, if you're at a dinner party with 10 people and one of them is a Nazi, exactly. Yeah, all these people. So they really don't like it because they think you're justifying Russia bombing children in Ukraine or whatever. And you're not. Obviously, war is bad and children should not be bombed. And that's a really bad thing. And also, people should not live in fear of Nazis running through their country trying to ethnically cleanse them and mailing their mothers their heads in boxes, which is what the Ukrainian military was doing in the Donbas region to people of ethnic Russian background. Like, that is not okay. And both of these people, like, are in a conflict, and war is bad, and they are both committing war crimes. And that is horrible. And it's horrible that innocent people are caught in the mix. But again, you can't have, like, a childish analysis of this that that fails to consider the role the United States has played in this, that fails to consider that Russia actually did try to avoid war for a long time, that fails to consider what the current government in Ukraine is fighting for. And what they are fighting for is bad. Nazis backed by NATO. Yep. Oh, see, here we go. This person. See, we always get a weird one in the chat. It's like, this is Russian propaganda. And you're like, my guy, my sources are U.S. government sources. None of this comes from Russia. Nothing I'm telling you comes from Russia. I'm so sorry. And people hate Russia so much that it makes them ding-dongs. It makes them, they have Russia derangement syndrome. And they will deny the truth. And this is the truth. So that's what's important. Ooh, flash flood warning. Uh-oh. Yeah, the burden of proof of, what is it? Okay, sorry. I'm looking at these people. Yeah, prove anything. What do you think is Russian propaganda that I said? What do we do here on Twitch? We talked about the news. That's what we've been doing. We've been talking about the news every day. We've been talking a little bit about politics. I'm thinking I might start to do video games in the evening, but in the daytime, I think we'll do like a daily news kind of recap. But I've got to get off of the internet now and start my real job. This is not my job, so I have to do my real job now. So I really appreciated you guys all hanging out today for long stream. A Christmas miracle. Long stream. I'll stretch before I go. We'll do it. Thank you all. Glad it was informative to everybody. Bye. Have a good one.